I get ideas from the world, from the past experiences. I picture trillions and zillions of ideas that we can catch. And the idea is to catch something that you fall in love with and you want to translate to some medium or another. I practice transcendental meditation as taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. You can meditate anywhere, anytime, day or night. Doesn't matter. Noise is no barrier. I always say I had one of my best meditations next to a jackhammer, working, tearing apart a sidewalk. People should know and remember the word transcend means go beyond. Get to the treasury within each one of us. The treasury is the ocean of pure consciousness, underlying the whole field of relativity, underlying all of matter and mind. And it's a field that's eternal, always been there. Modern science has discovered it, calling it the unified field. Unbounded intelligence, creativity, happiness, love, energy, power, and peace are there for us. Common sense would tell you it'd be very good to experience this field, because every time you truly experience it, when you transcend, you infuse some and you grow in that. And the side effect is negativity starts to lift away automatically, without trying. You can transcend without this technique. People have transcended. I transcended once before I learned this technique by daydreaming. Suddenly I slipped in there. I didn't know what it was. I wanted it again, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't even know what it was. And when people have transcended, between waking and sleeping, you're not asleep yet. You've got your head in the pillow, and you're drifting towards sleep. And in between each state of consciousness that most people experience, waking, sleeping, and dreaming, you can slip into this gap. And I picture it as a round white room with white walls. And there's 3 curtains, red, yellow, and blue, waking, sleeping, and dreaming. But say like you're in the waking, a yellow curtain, and right at the end, before it goes to blue, the sleeping curtain, you can dip in and get that white wall. Otherwise, it's covered. Transcendental meditation you do in the waking state, and you're in the yellow curtain, but it just gets more and more transparent, and then you experience the white wall, the transcendent, and you're rocking. And life gets better and better and better. So I meditate twice a day and have done it for 46 years.
Well, how do you feel looking back on that? I mean, how often do you actually watch Eraserhead these days?
I saw Eraserhead last with my then, I guess, 14-year-old son.
Right, and what questions did it prompt from your son?
Well, I don't answer them really anyway, so, but he really liked Eraserhead. Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Mm-hmm. Why elaborate on that?
No, I won't. No one sees it that way, or maybe somebody out there does, but it is.
Now, how did it feel? We're moving on somewhat here, but when the film was released and it began to just take off, and it happened.
It didn't ever take off.
Dude, I'm so Lynch-brained right now. Jesus Christ. Four movies in the last week, and I've also been listening to a lot of the music, so.
Dude, I decided after a conversation with Deli Music to watch Inland Empire again. I don't think I liked it that much. It's pure unpleasantness. There's a lot of creativity, and I'm not just blowing Lynch here. There's a lot of creativity that went into it. But after watching it, I was like, I kind of wish I just played video games instead. I think that would have been a healthier decision.
You mean a directionless creep out was not, what your soul needed at that moment?
Yeah. It just stepping down into nightmare juice and soaking in it. Yeah, I don't think that's really what I needed. My nightmare hot tub.
Yeah, I mean, I went ahead and also watched Mulholland Drive and, Firewalk with me. So I've seen 4 movies in the last week, and the upshot is to the extent that anyone can. Like, I think I've kind of seen The Matrix with David Lynch. Like, I think I've figured out the main idea.
Yeah.
But wow, my head hurts, dude. Like, I love this guy, but he is truly brutal.
Yeah.
On multiple levels.
Which is ironic because I think we mentioned this in the last episode. He's just a friendly old man in interviews. He's just like and also I loved his YouTube page when he used to do. Did you ever see his weather reports?
Yes, yeah.
I loved the David Lynch weather report.
This never-ending performance art thing that he did every day, where he just came out and said, "The random number for today is 4."
They should have featured that on Sesame Street.
Yeah. And apparently that was in the like paywall dimension of the David Lynch fandom, where you buy access to David Lynch's website, and what you get in exchange is every morning he basically wishes you a good morning, tells you what the weather is outside his house, and then reads you a random number. I mean, talk about content strategy, dude.
That's genius. I guess what you and I need to do to be a hack like him is just make a couple masterpieces, and then we can we can capitalize on that and do the Richard and Will weather report.
Just give me the studio, give me the money, give me the budget. I'll blow these fucking amateurs out of the water.
Yeah,
David Lynch,
I already
David
know.
Sminch, dude.
I already know who we can hire to make the soundtrack.
Sure enough.
He's actually been recommending me movies. I will say though, I actually am coming into this episode with a good vibe today. I was listening to some Nicholas Jar, and I was listening to Stereo Lab. Have you ever listened to Stereo Lab?
No.
You should listen to their album. I think it's called Dots and Lines. It's so soothing. It's so awesome. And I also learned a new term. It's lounge pop.
Lounge pop.
Lounge
Fantastic.
pop.
I use Tidal for streaming, and they have a playlist of like 42 songs that have been in David Lynch movies, or even like there's a song that was remixed by David Lynch. And then some other just kind of original pieces. And Lynch's taste in like Brill building, girl group, doo-wop, big band, all of that stuff. That music has a sort of incredible purity to it that I'm learning to appreciate. But yeah, it's something we can get into when we get into Lynch properly. So
yeah, we can get into the episode pretty soon. But,
yeah.
Oh God, I had a question on the tip of my tongue, but I forgot what it is. Oh yeah. Oh no, it wasn't a question. It was a statement. So I had an idea. I'm going to share this idea. You can tell me what you think, and then I'm perfectly fine introducing the episode. So what I was thinking for the intro of this one is it should be shorter than the last one because we don't need to go through the whole theme and monologue. Have the same soothing Twin Peaks theme song playing, but it's just the soundbite of the dude asking David Lynch what his most spiritual film is.
Oh my
David
God.
Lynch saying no. I thought about that in my head while I was having sushi today, and I was like, I like that idea. I think it'd be funny.
I want to put in the section in the interview where he talks about the red, yellow, and blue curtain.
Okay,
I don't know if
better than.
Yeah. Then I will include the part where he screams at that guy just for you. And so, yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted to do that. And then, like in the last episode, I managed to edit in some of Frank's best lines. So I also want to edit in Mr. Eddie, like the scene where he pulls those guys off the road and starts screaming at them about how many car lengths it takes to stop.
Beautiful. Smooth as shit from a duck's ass.
Tell him you won't tailgate.
Never!
I won't ever.
Do you know how many fucking car lengths it takes to stop a car at 35 miles an hour? 6 fucking car lengths! That's 106 fucking feet, mister! If I had to stop suddenly, you would have hit me! I want you to get a fucking driver's manual! I want you to study that motherfucker! And I want you to obey the goddamn rules! 50 fucking thousand people were killed on the highway last year because of fucking assholes like you!
Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us on our Lynchian little journey. We love having you, and we appreciate that you're here to watch the show. So when we last left off, we were talking about Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. We still have 2 more movies to go, starting with Will. But before we go into it, Will and I have an important little news flash. He watched Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me. And I just wanted to ask you before we went into the material, Will, what did you think?
Oh, dang. God, that's going to be hard. I think that I am now locked into seeing Twin Peaks, for starters.
Hell yes.
So there's that. I thought the movie was really terrifying near the end. It was really hokey in the beginning and really terrifying near the end, which is also kind of the structure of Blue Velvet, or the structure of like the first 10 minutes of Mulholland Drive versus the rest of Mulholland Drive. And I thought it was extremely well acted. I thought the music was really cool. The original score by Badalamenti. And yeah, I thought the ending was really terrifying. And I don't think I was quite as superbly freaked out as you were. And I think it's in part because you gave me like the guideposts for the movie going in. And you told me about Bob like fucking crouching on the edge of her bed and shit. And so
did it give you some goosebumps though?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially the scene where the dad, whatever his name is, Leland, is running through the woods with those 2 girls. That's just fucking terrifying. Lynch is kind of corny in that he loves the alone in the woods with a flashlight up your face effect.
Yeah.
Like he did that in Blue Velvet in the scene with Frank. And anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because it's effectively spooky, and also it's cheap to film in the forest. It's kind of a natural eeriness.
Yeah, but Firewalk with Me was definitely good. I think I think the beginning was like really aggressively strange. Often it felt like for no reason, where you're just like, what? Like the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie really barely fits into the movie at all. And
I agree completely.
And that was very like strange to me. So I powered through it though, and I now see it as like one more mosaic in my big Lynch universe. So I'm glad I watched it.
Yeah, it's a really I think it might be my favorite of Lynch's movies, but I don't think that's an opinion most people will hold though, because that is purely personal to me because I love Twin Peaks. So it's my favorite world he ever created.
Fair enough. And maybe you can explain some of this Black Lodge Red Room shit at some point. But anyway, so we got Lost Highway to deal with, and then we've got Mulholland Drive.
Absolutely.
So how do you want to proceed here?
I say that we just start with Lost Highway. We keep these movies chronologically in order. And before we go in, Will mentioned off mic before he got in here, when his camera first opened, I'm not kidding you, audience, his face was in his hands. I saw a lifeless husk, and I almost leapt out of my chair. And it's because this poor man, clutching, barely hanging on to his own sanity, has been binge watching Lynch movies, and I just saw the deepest sadness and emptiness in his eyes. And the thing is, Lost Highway might be one of Lynch's most, I don't even know how to put it, hopeless movies. It's just pure confusion. Not pure confusion from like a viewer point of view, but like, I don't know. It's just the epitome of everything that's killing Will right now. And I just wanted to say that before Will goes into it.
It takes a lot out of you to watch Lost Highway, Firewalk with Me, Blue Velvet, and Mulholland Drive. It really does. Because what all of those movies are about at sort of their primal depths is things like rape and sexual abuse and human trafficking and being, just mercilessly chewed up and spit out by this vast dark piece of machinery. So let's talk Lost Highway. Lost Highway came out the year I was born, 1997, and It is essentially a crime thriller mystery, and it takes place in two parts. There's a part where Bill Pullman plays a jazz musician named Fred, and that is a little bit of a tie-in with Lynch because Lynch loves jazz and so on. But so there's Fred slash Bill Pullman slash the president from Independence Day playing, the first male protagonist, Fred, and then he's married to Patricia Arquette, who is a much more mysterious and reserved figure. We don't know nearly as much about her, but they live in this enormous mansion on Mulholland Drive. And so the movie starts out from the perspective of this couple. And what you pick up on just right away is that everything in their life is fake. Their marriage is fake. Their house does not feel like a real house. It feels like an IKEA catalog. There's almost nothing in it. And a little strange detail for any Lynch head footnoters out there is that David Lynch, one of his hobbies is woodworking, and he actually designed a lot of the really interesting looking furniture in the house in Lost Highway. Like if you look around, you'll notice like this like Bauhaus to steel, like, very primitive like rectangles and painted triangles and stuff. So Lynch actually made a lot of that really weird furniture, like the TV stand. And so they have this extremely tense, cold marriage. It feels like something is broken between them. We find out right away that Patricia Arquette is having an affair, sleeping with someone else. And the knowledge of this is driving Bill Pullman insane. Excuse me. So that's the beginning of the movie. And what happens next, in a nutshell, is that Bill Pullman slowly becomes more and more and more unhinged. He tries to have sex with his wife, but his head is filled with images of her having sex with someone else, and he becomes like impotent. And so he's now totally trapped. He doesn't like his life. He is in this dead marriage. He feels humiliated, emasculated, and then they start receiving these envelopes full of VHS tapes that just show up on their door. And it's done in like this creepy camcorder style where a floating ghost presence in black and white seems to just be drifting through their house and then leaving these VHS tapes. And so I'll kind of lay out, that's the first 20 minutes of the movie or so. And so one of the things I want to talk about with Lost Highway is the music. So the music is very 90s industrial grunge. Mm-hmm. There's Trent Reznor, there's Rammstein, there's a Smashing Pumpkins song in there somewhere. There's a lot of that like post-Nirvana industrial sound, and it adds a sort of creepy dimension to Lynch that you don't get in the earlier stuff, because in the earlier stuff, and to a large extent in Mulholland Drive, you have these very sweet candy like pop songs from the 50s and 60s, and then you'll also have some of that Lynchian like dark reverb stuff, and then some of Badalamenti's very mysterious, ethereal, otherworldly jazz. But with Lost Highway, you get rock, you get metal, and it brings a little bit of freshness to this otherwise like never-ending loop of like 50s plot lines that runs through David Lynch. So I'll take a breath there, but that's the beginning of Lost Highway.
So I have a question. I rewatched Lost Highway in preparation for this episode because I thought, hey, why not? We had a couple of days going. Actually, we had about a week to get ready for it. And there are two very similar scenes in Mulholland Drive and in Lost Highway, which is a person transferring from one world to another where they're a completely different person. And on Mulholland Drive, I have an idea or a theory. It's not even my theory. Plenty of people have thought about it on why that change happens. From your perspective in Lost Highway, why does Bill Pullman's character become a new person about halfway through the film? Audience, if you want to just have a little bit of context on that, at some point, Bill Pullman's accused of murdering his wife and goes to prison. And I believe Will mentioned in the last episode that there's this scene where he's I think you said that it's almost like he's overdosing. These lights are flashing and getting brighter, and he stares at it was a spider, right?
Yes, sort of.
Yeah, you can pick up from there.
Okay, well, so just in terms of the plot, like, yes, eventually Bill Pullman snaps and he kills his wife, and he doesn't remember having done it, but he has it captured on VHS. And so the police come and they investigate. He goes to prison, and there's some interesting angles in there where he talks about how he doesn't like videotape because he prefers to remember the way he wants to remember. And so it kind of sets up this tension where, you know, the videotape is like the objective security camera footage of something, whereas your memory is self-serving or partial. Okay, so
did you get a little heartburn thinking about this movie?
No, okay. Since you're forcing me to talk about it, I have this very stupid thing where I swallow a lot of air every time I eat and drink, and so it means I burp more than most people there.
Are you just wolfing it down like a pelican? Is that why?
No, it's a real condition, okay? Like, I'm disabled.
I just imagine you, like, grabbing an entire fish and just cocking your head back.
How dare you make fun of my horrible impairment, you
Will
fucking
actually,
bastard.
I shouldn't be telling the audience this. You made me sign an NDA, but I'm just going to go ahead and risk it. When Will eats, he just sets it down on the floor in a straight line and slithers up to it like an anaconda and just engulfs all of it.
Just unhinge my jaw like a python and just wrap myself around it. Yeah.
I do this show with Will because I fear him. That's what I'm trying to say.
As you should.
Okay,
all right.
You were talking about the change from Bill Pullman's character evolving into a new person.
Right. So the loop that Lost Highway throws you through is that there's the first half of the movie where you have Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette as, let's just call them the couple. And then in the back half of the movie, when Bill Pullman has like a seizure in prison, it transitions to a younger actor. His name's Pete in the show. And then a new version of Patricia Arquette, who's now a blonde, named Alice Wakefield. So, you know, this couple is like a direct mirror image of each other. You have Pete and Alice, who are young and free. And then you have Patricia Arquette, I don't remember her name in that part of the movie, and Fred. So Fred turns into Pete. Brunette Patricia Arquette turns into blonde Patricia Arquette, Alice Wakefield. And the reason why that is happening, this is my kind of plot theory, I can't prove this, but this is the way it seems, is that is them basically 20 years back in time. That is what he is seeing in that moment is their origin story, but kind of re-encoded and represented through different characters. So the real plot of Lost Highway is that the second half happens and then the first half begins. That's the true chronology of Lost Highway. And so he becomes this younger version of himself. And the younger version of himself is, you know, broke, but hot and sexually attractive. And as the FBI guys who are watching him remark when he takes Patricia Arquette into the motel for like the fourth time that week, the FBI guys go, "That guy gets more pussy than a toilet seat," as they're surveilling him. And it's like, well, so, you know, regular, you know, Bill Pullman literally, you know, had like Viagra related issues, and whereas young Pete over here is getting more pussy than a toilet seat. And so that part is inverted. And then there's this question of, okay, where does Alice Wakefield, the new and improved version of his wife, come from? Because in the young romance, she is so catastrophically attracted to him, Alice, that she is willing to step out from her relationship with the violent psycho pimp, Mr. Eddie. And so she's just so hot for Pete that she puts her own life in her hands and risks angering the rich, powerful, violent, scary Mr. Eddie to be with Pete. And then later, when Patricia Arquette gets yoinked away, Pete has Mr. Eddie to blame for that. And so then the rest of the movie is Pete essentially trying to do the thing from Taxi Driver, where he looks at, the woman that's under the thumb or the control of this prostitution ring or this one guy, and tries to rescue her, only to realize that at bottom she doesn't really want to be rescued, and in fact thinks he's a fucking idiot for trying. So there's that.
Yeah, she kind of reminds me of the God, who was the actress in Blue Velvet that played Frank's girlfriend?
Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah, she kind of reminds me of Isabella Rossellini's character, in the sense that she's somebody that's kind of settled into this seedy world, and she's scared, she's in danger, she doesn't really have a choice but to stay with Eddie, but at the same time, she almost kind of looks down on how naive that character is.
Yeah, no, we're looking at the evolved form of Isabella Rossellini here, because with Blue Velvet and the singer in Blue Velvet, she's kind of blindsided by getting involved in this human trafficking thing that Frank is doing, whereas in Lost Highway, Patricia Arquette is initially blindsided in the sense that she is initially very much a victim, but later kind of comes to be, I would say, complexly involved with what they're doing. And in some ways voluntarily participating, in other ways not. But definitely she knows how to manipulate people. She knows how to manipulate Pete to get him to join her on this heist that she wants to pull off. And she knows how to keep Mr. Eddie from freaking out, even though he knows that those two are fucking. So she's a much more grown-up character, but at the same time, I think Lost Highway is essentially David Lynch's version of Eyes Wide Shut with Stanley Kubrick, where in Eyes Wide Shut, Kubrick depicts that, at the heart of the elite social scene, there is this system where women are trafficked and traded like objects, where they're coerced into participating in these rituals. And you see that in David Lynch's scene where Patricia Arquette is kind of brought to this house, this mansion, that, and she's not told anything. She's just said, come here for this job. It'll be worth your while. She goes, okay. So she stands there on the foyer for like an hour or something. And then she gets brought inside. And what does she see? She sees Mr. Eddie sitting on a throne in front of a fireplace looking like Satan. And then there's like 8 of his goons all like standing around in a perimeter watching. And then without anybody saying anything, one of the goons comes up to her and just puts a loaded gun to her head. And no one says anything. There's a lot of eye contact and a lot of fear and paralysis. And then she figures out what they want her to do. She figures out what this is about. So you see her, it's very well acted. She goes through all the stages of like shock, anger, denial, disgust, depression, acceptance. She does that in about 5 seconds on her face. And then she starts undressing and she, crawls over to Mr. Eddie. And it's like, okay, like she's now essentially like a sex slave or a concubine. And that's essentially what you see with some of the scenes in Eyes Wide Shut as well. The same sort of exploitative group sex situation. And so that's the situation with Patricia Arquette. And so there is like this theme that runs through David Lynch. This is what I meant when I said I saw The Matrix when it comes to David Lynch and what he's about, where he is making movies that are about all the women that Hollywood destroyed. All the women that in some way or another got their careers ruined by being excluded unfairly, or got their careers made, but made only because they were forced to engage in acts of depravity that they, were horribly exploitative and they would have preferred not to. And so that's what Mulholland Drive is about. That's what Lost Highway is about. That's what Inland Empire is about. And so on. So That's kind of my theory about the late David Lynch. And so Lost Highway is kind of a precursor or a prototype movie for Mulholland Drive, where
Absolutely.
it's a lot more contained, and it's really Lynch playing with this thematic thing of like, what if we had parallel characters, parallel lives, where the characters are like the imagination or the fantasy or the memory of some other character. And so we'll talk about that in Mulholland Drive, which I think is where he does it at like the highest level of the game. But yes, so that's Lost Highway in a nutshell. There's plenty more to it, but that's a start.
So I've got two things that I want to ask. First one, there's a theory that Stanley Kubrick was murdered by the system, by the government, for making Eyes Wide Shut. When David Lynch makes this movie in 1997, he went on to live until, I believe, 2022, something like, until this year. Do you think the reason why the Hollywood elite didn't kill David Lynch is because that movie's too fucking hard to even understand? Like they just didn't even register that that's what it was about.
Yeah, I think that the sickos in Hollywood figured that Lynch's movies would be so impenetrable that only already fringe, psychotic, weird white guys on the internet would be able to decipher them, and therefore, people that pose no threat, in other words. So
yeah, exactly. So the second thing I wanted to ask was, for context, the audience, Will mentioned that Bill Pullman is being haunted by this kind of like supernatural figure, and he's kind of creepy and weird looking. He looks like a marionette doll. Also, he has the reddest lips I've ever seen in my life. He looks like he's been sucking on Jolly Ranchers for the past 50 years straight. But what do you think his role in the movie is? Or not his role. What do you think the point of that character is? What is he supposed to represent?
well, I think the fastest way to read that character is that character symbolizes like murderous intent. Because you see that character who, I think in the credits he's called the Mystery Man, so we'll just go with that. The Mystery Man is, the guy with the V-shaped black haircut and like the white geisha powder on his face.
He looks like fucking Dracula.
Yeah, he looks extremely, creepy, of course, but Mystery Man appears in these moments where characters are thinking about or about to commit murder. So like there's 3 scenes where Mystery Man shows up. The first time that we see Mystery Man is when Bill Pullman is with Patricia Arquette at like a big, like what you would imagine of like a Hollywood elite party in the 90s. There's mansion, there's pool, there's Coke, there's an open bar, there's people chittering and chattering in their designer dresses. And so Patricia Arquette sends Bill Pullman downstairs to get her a drink while she is flirting with the guy that Bill Pullman knows she's fucking. So it's super humiliating. It's like, you, my husband, go away so that I can fucking slobber all over this dude who's fucking me. And so Bill Pullman, like a beaten dog, clenching his fist, goes downstairs to get her a drink. So he walks up to the bar and he says, 2 scotches neat. I'm like, okay. So they poured the 2 drinks. And so you see the pained look on his face, like, God, I'm such a fucking asshole. My wife is fucking that guy. And so he pounds his scotch, and then he looks at the second scotch, right? There's this moment where you're like, is he really going to bring her a drink, or is he going to drink her drink? And he drinks her drink. So he drinks his shot and her shot as kind of a fuck you to her. And the moment that he does that, that's when the Mystery Man appears and comes over to him. And so the moment that he has that action, which signals fuck you, Patricia Arquette, that's the moment Mystery Man appears. And they talk, and there's this very ethereal dialogue, which I'll kind of dub in here.
We've met before, haven't we? I don't think so. Where was it you think we met? At your house, don't you remember? No, I don't. Are you sure? Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now. What do you mean you're where right now? At your house. That's fucking crazy, man.
But the point of it is that the mystery man only goes where he is invited. I mean, coming back to like that Dracula theme, there is, kind of classical theories of evil, the philosophy of evil or the problem of evil. The Christian theories tend to focus on the idea of temptation, that you are tempted with things that you are able to withstand and resist, but they have no power over you until you agree to them, until you actually make a free decision to pursue what's evil. And that is the point of what the mystery man is saying, where he says, like, I only go where I am invited, and you invited me into your house because you're thinking about killing Patricia Arquette. And the next time we see Mystery Man, it's with Mr. Eddie when he's on the phone with Pete, telling Pete that he's going to die, that he's threatening his life. Like, he hands the phone to Mystery Man. Another piece of dialogue I'll dub in here, where Mystery Man says,
Hello?
Hey, Pete, how you doing?
Who is it?
You know who it is.
Mr. Eddie.
Yeah. How you doing, Pete?
Okay.
You doing okay? That's good, Pete.
Look, it's late, Mr. Eddie.
I'm really glad to know you're doing okay. You sure you're okay? Everything all right?
Yeah.
I'm really glad to know you're doing good, Pete. Hey, I want you to talk to a friend of mine.
We've met before, haven't we? I don't think so. Where is it you think we've met? At your house. Don't you remember? No. No, I don't. In the East, the Far East, when a person is sentenced to death, they're sent to a place where they can't escape. Never knowing when an executioner may step up behind them and fire a bullet into the back of their head. What's going on? It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pete, I just wanted to jump on and tell you that I'm really glad you're doing okay.
in the East, in the Far East, a man is sent to where he can never escape. And then, one day, they kill him. And then they hand the phone back to Mr. Eddie. Mr. Eddie's just like, it's so good that you're doing good, Pete. That's just great. That's just wonderful. All right, Pete. Bye-bye. and so then the next scene where you see Mystery Man is where Pete decides that he's going to murder Mr. Eddie. And then Pete and Mr. Eddie team up to actually murder, Pete and the Mystery Man team up to murder Mr. Eddie, where Mystery Man even makes a knife appear out of nowhere so that Pete can stab Mr. Eddie to death at the end of the movie. And so I think it's pretty clear what Mystery Man is about. Mystery Man is the desire to kill, and how the desire to kill unlocks an element of your mind, a part of your consciousness that previously was offline or dormant or whatever.
It's interesting that you compare the Mystery Man to like traditional Christian morality and the idea of like what role evil and demons play in Christianity, because oftentimes, you mentioned that in that mythology, you have to invite the evil in, and Bill Pullman does, Pete does. And I liked how earlier you mentioned Bill Pullman talking about how, I don't like tapes. I don't like VHS and stuff. I like to just lean on my memories. And you pointed out that it's because video is objective. It's interesting to mention that, in the Christian mythos, there's when demons help you, when they come in to assist you in your life, they're doing it out of a sense of nihilistic entertainment because they know that they're going to be cast into the lake of sulfur and fire someday. And so they just get their kicks mocking humanity and torturing them. And it's funny because at the end of Lost Highway, after Pete stabs Mr. Eddie, he turns back into Bill Pullman, and the mystery man has a tape. He's got a tape right up to him, and he's just laughing and chasing him. It's pretty spooky. And it's that sense of evil. It's the universe mocking Bill Pullman almost for indulging his more violent impulses. And then it ends with him just bordering on insane, soaring down the highway at night.
Yeah, and the worst things that happen in Lost Highway are captured on tape. So, like, you know, the two equivalents are, you know, the mystery man films Pete as Pete/Bill Pullman as he kills Mr. Eddie. And then there's also a scene where Patricia Arquette's character there's a film of her fucking this guy who has like demon makeup on, and Rammstein is playing in the background. And so there's using film, using footage to capture people at their worst moments, right? Is something that comes up. And again, it comes back to like just mocking human beings, right? Just the infernal desire to show humans at their worst, their lowest, their most depraved, to show that everyone can be bought, everybody can be threatened or killed. And so that is a big part of what Lost Highway is about, for sure.
Yeah, I also have to wonder, and I don't even mean this as a joke, I wonder if there's a little bit of David Lynch in Bill Pullman's character, because by this point he was on his third divorce. I'm not saying that David Lynch ever considered hurting women or whatever, but I wonder if that's him exploring the darkest urges he had during his marriage, or not the darkest urges, but the anger he felt, and the depression and the sense of loss and the sense of impotence that you have when a relationship is failing.
It's possible. I think that one of the funny counterfactuals, or one of the funny possibilities, is just imagining Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette as the grown-up versions of Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern in Blue Velvet.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what if you gave that Blue Velvet couple like 10 or 15 years, right? And one of the funny little Easter eggs is Bill Pullman, when he opens up his saxophone case right at the beginning, the upholstery in the sax case is Blue Velvet. So,
I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, there's a nice little continuity there, where it's like, okay, like maybe we achieved escape velocity, where we got away from, you know, the worst elements of the town, but at the end of the day, there's still this sub-nexus of crime and power and influence that we could slip into at any time. And that's also the theme of Eyes Wide Shut, which is that beneath the apparent surface of things, you know, there is kind of the classic elite conspiracy, which if you're unfortunate enough, you can discover and fall into. And I think that with Lynch, there's always a coupling between sexual dysfunction and then the outbreak of some kind of terrible violence. Like in Blue Velvet, you see it with the Frank character, who it's a really horrifying detail, but like when Frank rapes Dorothy in Blue Velvet, he never takes his pants off, and the whole thing lasts for about like 15 seconds. And so it's as if he has like premature ejaculation, or has, you know, some terrible sexual thing where like this is the only way he can orgasm, or like probably the exact moment that Bill Pullman decides that he's going to murder Patricia Arquette, or at least the moment where he like passes the point of no return in that decision, is the moment where he can't get an erection while he's having sex. And like similarly in Mulholland, anyway, the point is that these two things are linked. And I think when you look at like real life examples of fucking incel terrorists, you can see that there is definitely something to that thesis. So anyway.
Yeah, it's also the same for a lot of serial killers too, but we're not going to talk about that. That is usually a breaking point for a lot of them. So, Will, do you have any final thoughts on Lost Highway? Anything you'd like to tell the audience
Well,
before
yeah.
they go into it?
So I think that Lost Highway is largely a male fantasy, whereas Mulholland Drive is largely a female fantasy.
You
But
took
here's
my fucking line, you fuck face. I was gonna say
you
that.
fuck, you pig fuck.
You pig fuck.
Let's fuck! Don't you look at me, fuck! Next! You out of the car, fuck! You receive a love letter from me, you're fucked forever!
We need to do a PTA episode
Let's
someday.
Fuck. Anyway. Yeah.
Fuck
Anyway.
might be the greatest word in the English language.
Okay, so I'll just look down my notes on Lost Highway. So, Fred, who's Bill Pullman, right, in the first half, when he's having this hang up with Patricia Arquette, so he has this nightmare, which he then describes, and he says, you know, in my nightmare, my wife is in bed, and I come up on her, but she's not my wife, right? And so it's like this. He's having this nightmare of an invasion of the body snatchers thing, where he's looking for an explanation of why does she not love me anymore? Why does she not want to have sex with me anymore? Why is she fucking this other guy? Why is she lying to me? And so through his dream, which is this, if we go back to Freud, the dream is a staging of an unconscious fantasy. Bill Pullman needs a version of events where Patricia Arquette fucking not loving him anymore isn't his fault. And so you can see the subplot with like Pete and Mr. Eddie and her being a victim of this human trafficking network as the male fantasy for why she doesn't love him. Mm-hmm. It's like I could imagine two versions of Lost Highway, like the fake Lost Highway, which is the one we watch where she's involved in some, you know, crazy human trafficking ring where she's caught on, you know, footage having sex with the devil, as one explanation for why she doesn't like him. And then the real Lost Highway, where we just watch them fail to be a good romantic couple for 10 years and just like watch, you know, him not take out the trash and, you know, her not share her feelings and him drink too much and her withdraw emotionally. And that is the true explanation for why they don't have sex, why they don't love each other, why their marriage is fake, why all of that, why their house is fake. And so you could see Lost Highway as this like violent, desperate, like male mental imagining of, I need some reason why my wife doesn't love me that isn't just, you know, I'm an asshole.
Yeah. Which is it's very relatable to an extent. I think that for anybody who's been in relationships, you could probably think back in times, especially like when you first start dating and you're kind of immature, whenever that starts for certain people, when as a cope, you know, after you break up, they're the bad guy, even though that wasn't even close to reality, because it's comforting to think that you were just screwed over rather than admit that you need to grow.
Yeah. Or like going back to the videotape thing where Bill Pullman says he hates video because it doesn't let him remember the way he wants to remember. So there's this scene where they're in their car and they're talking about their past. And we sort of know, if we apply what you learn in the back half of the movie to the first part of the movie, that what they're talking about is back when she was Mr. Eddie's fucking sex slave. Mm-hmm. And so she's recounting the story. And he keeps asking her, like, what did you do? Where did you go? What was the job? And she has like kind of this dazed look in her eye, like, oh, I can't remember. And then, you know, and then you can kind of smash cut in your mind to the scene where it's the projector image of her, you know, fucking the guy with the demon makeup. And it's like, well, that's why Fred doesn't like videotapes. Because when Pete, i.e. young Fred, comes around the corner in the mansion and looks up on the wall, it sees a 112-foot, you know, projected image of Patricia Arquette fucking Satan. You know, that's why he doesn't like videotape. Mm-hmm. Nobody can handle that much reality. So
it's funny. Something that I noticed about Lynch, and I've never seen him talk about this in any interviews or anything. I think David Lynch fucking hates LA. I think he hates LA and he hates Hollywood and what it does. Yeah. I mean, I think LA is where he had to live just for his career to function, but there is so much hatred for LA from the highest, richest people to just the streets themselves, it is depicted as a nightmare concrete shithole.
Yeah, LA is not represented sympathetically. Later on in the movie, where Patricia Arquette is blonde Alice Wakefield, she's on the phone with Pete and she says, I have to go somewhere with Mr. Eddie. And she sounds all afraid. And you can see like Pete's mental cogs starting to turn as he's imagining, all the stuff that Mr. Eddie's about to do to her. And that's the moment where in Lost Highway, the literal room starts spinning and you get the close up on the insects and the Nine Inch Nails soundtrack plays. And it's like, what makes the psychosis happen in Lost Highway is just male chauvinist sexual jealousy, because the moment that enters the picture, it's like, oh my God, like my whole universe is disintegrating. Like I can't accept this contradiction of like, she loves me and she's attracted to me, but she's also off fucking Satan. And it's like, there's a really close cut where Pete is having sex with Patricia Arquette, on a bed that's literally like a swan bed. Like the headboard is like these two swans, which I'm pretty sure David Lynch must have made physically for the movie himself, because of his woodworking thing, now that I think about it. And it's like swans mate for life, right? It's a symbol of monogamy. So he's like having this very pure, like, oh, it's just you and me thing. And then almost the next scene is him coming around the corner in the mansion and seeing the black and white footage of her fucking Satan while Rammstein plays in the background. Right? And so it's just this never ending, like, dash back and forth. And then famously, the critical thing at the end where they've both driven out to the middle of nowhere and, they're planning to fence their stolen shit. And so it's like this moment of like maximum vulnerability. And, they get down on the ground and they start having sex. And then Patricia Arquette, at this moment of like maximum like sexual climax, she looks at him and goes, "You will never have me," and then leaves. Right. So total defeat, total humiliation. And that's where the movie ends. And that's what sets off his psychotic rage. And that's why he kills Mr. Eddie.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Patricia Arquette, I think, would agree with you, because I read this interview that she did about the movie where the interviewer sits down and they're like, hey, what the fuck was that? What the hell did I just watch? And that's kind of what she goes into, about how it's at least partially about the dark side of masculinity and how even in failing relationships, certain men view their partner as a possession. And, Bill Pullman at this point is getting impotent. You don't even know if he's still attracted to her necessarily. And yet, despite the fact that he's miserable and the relationship is failing, the worst possible thing, even though he's tired of this relationship, is feeling like she belongs to someone else.
It's feeling like he can't own her, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He can't own her and he can't keep up. And that's what shrivels his fucking dick. And yeah, it is an element of male psychology that is undeniable. But the movie, my problem with the movie is that it's sort of just that. It's sort of just that simple. And I don't find a ton there to keep digging on, other than, okay, women getting railroaded into various versions of human trafficking by rich people in Hollywood. Okay, that's a theme. Pathological male sexual jealousy, that's a theme. And then, people mythologizing or distorting their past, another theme, fine. What Walter Benjamin calls the gap between transcript and memory, where transcript is like all the facts that we have about history, whereas memory are the things we actually know and act like we know and emphasize, where there's always this insufficiency where we don't really know the past, and what we make of the past is just some useful fantasy that makes our self-image okay. Because both of these characters are essentially thieves and liars and by the end murderers, and that's how they get the house on Mulholland Drive. That's how they get the mansion. That's how the fact that like in the first half of the movie, like neither of them does anything that resembles like a paying job. Bill Pullman just goes out there and wails on the fucking saxophone.
That's such a good scene.
And for the record, that scene rocks, where like the strobe lights are going and he's just like full free jazz. And it's like, listen, man, there's probably only 3 or 4 sax players on the planet that can blow a sax hard enough to get a $20 million mansion in Hollywood. So where the fuck did this place come from is a question that is pretty apparent right at the beginning. And it's like, oh, it turns out it's because they murdered this guy and stole his shit 20 years ago.
Holy shit. So I was just looking into it. Bill Pullman actually learned how to play sax just for that solo.
That rocks. That's so
it's
fucking
so awesome.
Cool.
Okay, 1 second. I need to blow Bill Pullman for a second. I love him. Have you ever seen the show The Sinner?
The Sinner?
The Sinner.
No.
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
No.
He plays, so I think I showed you the first episode when we were in Alaska. The first episode, and everything onward, that show is fucking amazing. Bill Pullman plays this like washed up, depressed detective who pays prostitutes to step on his hands. Like he is the grumpiest, most traumatized man who's ever existed in the history of mankind. But it's great. I would recommend it to anybody out there who likes crime thrillers. Season 2 kind of dips in quality, but other than that, seasons 1, 3, and 4 are great.
I also just love that goofy shit where he was the president for Independence Day. And he gives the big dramatic speech. I just love the smash cut from like him rallying the Earth Defense Forces to then like a washed up detective paying women to step on his fingers.
No,
same guy, different days of the week, you know?
No, honestly, I think that Independence Day might be the fucking dumbest movie ever made.
The scene where Will Smith just goes, "Welcome to Earth, motherfucker," and punches the alien in the face. You take that back, dude.
God, yeah, I remember rewatching it as an adult because I loved it when I was a kid. And I was like, this kind of sucks.
Oh, it's terrible. Just awful.
I mean, I like it, but it is the schlockiest thing I've ever seen. And then that director was like, oh, I'll just make that movie again 15 times. Like he made like the Day After Tomorrow. They're all just horrible disaster spectacle movies where, you know, a kid is running away from the Earth's mantle being lifted behind him and he like grabs a dog and picks it up while he's running. It's the corniest shit ever.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's my theory of Lost Highway. I think it's pretty, you know, there's a lot of Reddit scholars out there that might want to fight me in the comments section. You fucking go for that. I'm up to hearing other theories on what Lost Highway is about, but I think I've fully put the picture together on that one. And now let's go to Mulholland Drive, bud. You ready to dig in?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay. Where do you want to start here?
Capital R ready. Well, I guess I want to start with, do you have any questions for me before I absolutely grab either end of my jaw and rip myself inside out to rant about this movie?
Yeah, I'm going to ask what's obviously the most important, serious, essential film interpretive question, which is, do you think Naomi Watts or Laura Herring is hotter in this movie?
Naomi Watts.
Okay.
She may be David Lynch's best girl, not sure, or Patricia Arquette, because I love her. She's so good in Severance, by the way. Patricia Arquette, she's awesome. She plays a great villain. Yeah.
All right. Okay, now that I've asked the dumbest question possible, like, let's get into like what actually happens in Mulholland Drive. I think the first thing we need to do is we need to just set out the characters and the plot a little bit, and just like remind people who watched this shit 8 years ago, but they were stoned, like what this movie is, please.
Me.
So, yeah.
Okay, so just to set the stage, much like Lost Highway, this is a very LA movie. It starts and there are basically 3 main characters, 2 in particular, that the movie centers around. The first one is Betty. Betty is an aspiring actress, very bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. You know, her elderly relatives drop her off, and it's got that classic actress scene where she gets out of the car and is starstruck that she's finally there. She's finally in Hollywood.
It's almost corny, you know?
I think it's intentionally corny.
Yeah.
It's intentionally elevated. The other character is Rita, who at the beginning of the movie, she's in a car. There's somebody aiming a gun at her. You know that she's in danger. The car gets in a crash, and she's an amnesiac for the remainder of most of the film. And the last character is Adam. Adam is a director trying to get this movie made, but the mob is funding it, and they need him to have a specific actress and stuff. So the movie itself is essentially an exploration of an actor's life in Hollywood. There are scenes where Betty, the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed one, goes to rehearse a scene with an older male actor, and he's very handsy, very touchy, and even despite that, she still gives a great performance, but it's very gross. It's another example of David Lynch looking at Hollywood and giving them the biggest middle finger he could possibly produce. So just to start at the beginning, I mentioned that there's a car crash that kind of sets off the events of the film. When Betty gets out of that car, she's dropped off at a family property. It's kind of an apartment. And she goes in and she finds Rita, the car crash amnesiac, hiding there. So she walks up and she's like, hello? You can kind of tell immediately that she's a very gentle, kind soul because she isn't scared necessarily. She walks in and Rita's in the shower and she just wants to help this poor, confused woman. So she asks her, she says, hey, what's your name? And Rita can't remember. And she looks over and sees a magazine with an actress named Rita. So she just says Rita. And they start forming a friendship. Immediately, Betty has an interest in solving the mystery of what happened to this woman and what's happening around her. Another thing to note is that, Betty says, hey, Rita, maybe we should look through your purse. Maybe there will be some clues to what happened to you. So they find this huge bundle of money. And they also find something that's kind of interesting. A blue box and a blue rectangular key. And I want to go into something for a moment. I don't know why, but I think David Lynch thinks the color blue has superpowers.
There's a lot of blue shit in his movies.
And in this one specifically, it's so at some point when this movie came out, it was a smash hit. It's maybe the most successful movie David Lynch ever made. And a lot of people asked him, like, hey, what does it mean? Explain the movie, yada, yada, yada. And in David Lynch fashion, he said, no, I don't want to. But on the special Blu-ray or whatever it was, the special at-home release that he made, he created this guidebook. And I'm not going to go through it because I think it's fucking dumb. But he added this guidebook where one of the points that he makes, the keys to unlocking the secret behind this movie, was pay attention to what color the key is. And I don't know. I guess the closest thing I can think of, because you watched Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me, the ring in that is blue as well. So maybe it's an allusion to like the blue fairy or something. He likes those old, he likes the Wizard of Oz. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm playing Lies of P, but a lot of it kind of reminded me of the blue fairy from Pinocchio. Just this association with the color blue with specifically transformation from one state to another. Because I guess we can just jump ahead for a moment.
Well, let me interject and say one thing,
do.
which is he does have an interview where he talks explicitly about his color theory. And I don't think this applies to fucking everything he ever did and whatever, but he talks about the three states of consciousness: awake, asleep, dreaming, right? And then the sort of in-between daydream state or alpha state, mind drifting. And he calls them the red, yellow, and blue curtains. Red for awake, yellow for daydream, and blue for asleep dreaming. So I think that you could make a pretty simple one-to-one with like blue equals dreaming. Blue equals like deep structural fantasy. Yeah.
I'm not going to get into it yet, but near the end of the movie, we'll definitely talk about that, my explanation for what's happening in the movie. So Will is going to clench his knuckles when he hears me say this. I want to talk about the production of the movie a little bit. Before we get into that, basically before we go into that, basically the plot of the movie is Betty and Rita trying to unlock the mystery of what happened to Rita. So getting into the production of it, it was kind of interesting. Initially, David Lynch conceived of this movie as a spin-off, actually as a television show, a spin-off of Twin Peaks, where one of the characters, who's this kind of moody background character, comes to LA to become an actress. So as David Lynch was working on that, he kind of dropped that idea. The studios weren't that into it. And so he decided, okay, I'm going to make Mulholland Drive just a completely separate series. And rewatching the movie, it is surprising how much Twin Peaks I saw in it afterwards. It's very different, but long story short, David Lynch is trying to get this thing made, and it's a fucking nightmare. I think I mentioned in the last episode, the studio keeps giving him notes. They're like, please, Lynch, it's like 2000, it's 1999. You can't smoke indoors anymore. And he's like, no, what the hell? I can't experiment. I'm being produced by Nazis.
That's the moment he became a libertarian.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I do have to address David Lynch didn't care about politics that much. He wasn't like a libertarian. I don't want to insult his name.
Lynch's politics are not interesting and don't matter, and I would not bother looking into them.
I mean, even if you did look into him, there's nothing particularly problematic. He didn't give a fuck about politics. He just heard the word libertarian and is like, well, I guess I'm kind of that. But we know in '84 he voted for Reagan, and then in 2006 he voted for Bernie Sanders. So dude just kind of rolled with the tide, But oh well. So as he's making this show, he just hits roadblock after roadblock, and he reaches a point where he's just sick of all this shit. The production company is kind of saying that they're probably not going to make the movie. Lynch is realizing that he's hitting another dead end with producers, and he hates that. He will tell you that himself. So eventually he kind of just drops the movie, or drops the show. Before he drops the show, though, right before that, as he's making it, he needs ideas. For a rare moment, David Lynch has writer's block. And what he ends up doing is, we talked about transcendental meditation in the last episode. And I kind of liked reading the interview he did about this. He said he went into his room, he sat down, and he cleared his mind of all thoughts for 20 minutes. And near the end of it, the way he phrased it, he said the pearls of ideas just started coming and coming and coming. They flew past me, and suddenly I just had all these images in my mind, all these things that I wanted to produce on screen for this movie, for this show that I can't make. But as kind of a coincidence, he had this friend from France, because David Lynch was really into like European filmmaking, and he ends up going on vacation to France just to kind of like soothe himself, just to kind of ease his frustrations and get the fuck out of LA, kind of recollect his thoughts. And his friend introduces him to a production company called Studio Canal. Now, that's the end of me talking about the production. They're the ones that end up producing this as a movie. That's kind of when Lynch decides he wants it to be a movie. The reason I talk about that is Mulholland Drive is my favorite Lynch movie, maybe neck tied to Fire Walk with Me. But the first 30 to 40 minutes are so incoherent. There are scenes that all seem incredibly disconnected. And I want to say for the audience two things. Going into this movie, I swear it eventually will get a grip, and those scenes will kind of mean something. Also, the reason why is because those were all going to be scenes in the television show. He was just setting all these things up. So you basically just have to realize that he's setting all those scenes up thinking that this is going to be like 45 minutes. All those scenes are cut from the pilot episode. And that's why it kind of feels all over the place. Because
that's apparently out there, by the way, is the pilot episode that he made that got shut down. So apparently that's available as like a bootleg that you can watch.
Yeah, I've not
seen it, but
I don't know if it's worth watching, because David Lynch talked about that, and he said that the original cut of it was over an hour. And he said, yeah, the studio note was that it was too slow, which was true. But then they cut it down to, I don't know, 50 minutes or something, 45 minutes for commercial breaks. And he said that sucked too. So I think the movie is probably the most accurate version of his vision.
The one thing I'll say about the beginning of Mulholland Drive is, yes, it is totally fragmentary, like you said, where it's about 4 or 5 completely separate plots that are taking place in these little like 2 to 8 minute scenes. But the thing is that, and I gotta say, unlike Firewalk with Me, each of these individual little scenelets or vignettes is actually so good that it's just fun to watch by itself. Like, even though it doesn't make immediate sense, the scene like with Dan at Winky's Diner, or the scene where
we gotta unpack that in a sec.
The scene where the hitman like accidentally ends up killing like 4 people. That felt like very dorky Tarantino material.
But executed by Lynch, so it's just even more quirky and weird. So you mentioned the diner. So the structure of this movie, that you get the setup with Betty, you get the setup with Rita, where the car crashes, she and Betty meet, and then out of nowhere, it cuts to this diner, and here's an opportunity for me to talk about my background with Lynch. So I watched Mulholland Drive was my first David Lynch movie. Actually, no, my dad showed me Dune when I was a kid, but I fell asleep because I didn't like Dune yet. But
You
the
had
first
patrician
one,
chased even as a child. You're like, this is mediocre. This is
this is wow. What happened? Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think I fell asleep at the halfway point, which is when the movie turns to shit. but
Hmm.
but at some point, I was scrolling through YouTube. I think I was 16 or 17, and I saw this this YouTube titled "Scariest Jump Scene Ever," and I was kind of getting into horror, so I was like, okay, I'll click on it. And it starts off, two dudes are talking in a diner. And one of the guys is explaining to his friend, he's like, "Yeah, I keep on having this reoccurring nightmare that actually takes place here at the diner." He was like, "Oh, tell me about it." And he's like, we're here, but out of nowhere, I feel like I'm being watched. And I think of this face, and I never want to see this face again in my entire life. And eventually, you stand up and we go to check it out. And as he's talking, as the audience, you kind of start realizing that even though he's describing the nightmare, he's kind of in it.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh, boy.
Well, it's the second one I've had. But they're both the same. They start out that I'm in here, but it's not day or night. It's kind of half night, But it looks just like this, except for the light. And I'm scared like I can't tell you. Of all people, you're standing right over there. By that counter. You're in both dreams. And you're scared. I get even more frightened when I see how afraid you are, and then I realize what it is. There's a man in back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. I hope that I never see that face ever outside of a dream.
And his friend gets up and goes, and he says, "You coming with me, pal?" He's like, "Okay." So they go out the entrance to the diner. They curl around and start walking towards this alleyway. And as they're getting closer, this guy's covered in sweat, and he's stepping, and it keeps on cutting to the camera getting closer to this corner of the alley, and then it goes back to the guy's face, and he's just walking with these wide, fearful eyes because he's kind of realized that it's going to happen. And out of nowhere, there's no way for me to do this justice because you're going to hear that and be like, "That's not scary." But this figure emerges from out of the corner. And in a traditional jump scare, that's when it would be like, there would be like a loud bang or a noise to make you jump in the movie theater. No, out of nowhere, it sounds like somebody punching a bag full of sand, and then it just goes quiet. And all you hear is his heartbeat as he slowly falls back. And even if you're not going to watch this movie, YouTube that scene. Because I saw that, and it's immediately there rings of sweat underneath my armpits. And I went and I pirated the movie immediately and then watched it, and that's where my start with David Lynch was that because I had never seen anything like that before in cinema.
Yeah, it's a fantastic scene, and the dialogue that goes before it also has a slightly magnetic, like poetic effect where you feel your imagination getting activated by the way that Dan is describing this. Like he talks about how like it wasn't day or night. It was sort of like half night, but the light was just like this, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is the realm of like pure unformed like imagination. It's very cool for that. And but yeah, the sound that is played, and again, David Lynch, sound designer, guy that played around with all this stuff. The way I've always heard that sound is like the exact thing you would hear if you actually had a heart attack.
Yes.
Like that is the official sound of the last thing you ever hear. So a very, very powerful, scary scene. Yeah, agreed.
And I think part of the reason why it is, aside from the sound design, which I think we talked about last episode, part of the reason why it's so fucking scary is because it perfectly captures what a nightmare feels like. A lot of horror movies feel more grounded, even ones that are ghost stories and stuff, because they don't feel that surreal. It's more just scary shit's happening for like a Conjuring movie or something. Not to shit on those movies too bad though. Like the first two of them are all right. But when you're having a nightmare, it's not like you feel put together. You don't feel logical. You don't feel like you have any control over your environment. It usually starts with confusion. The best thing I can liken it to is, back in the day, if you go to like a county fair or something, they have those little horror rides where you get into a little roller coaster and they wheel you through a scary house and just like you have no control over where you're going.
At Disneyland.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That's kind of what a nightmare is like, because you go into it and you don't know it's a nightmare. You don't even know you're sleeping, and you're in some environment, whatever your brain produces. And it usually things don't happen out of nowhere. Most of the time it's, you think to yourself, oh man, I hope X, Y, and Z doesn't happen. And then it happens. There's sort of an inevitability to the fear in a nightmare, almost like you're getting sucked into a black hole. And I think that's reflected in the character describing his nightmare and finding himself back in it. Because if that's really what he believes, there's no reason to go back there and check to see if there's this scary homeless demon behind the cafe. But he isn't in control of what he's doing to an extent. It's fate. It's set in stone. He needs to go out there and be terrified again. And that's what the nightmare is.
It reminded me of that scene from, I think, season 2 of Stranger Things, or maybe season 3, where that one little boy, I think his name was William or Will, gets advice from like his stepdad about nightmares, where the stepdad's just trying to be like, sweet and positive about it. And he's like, the next time you have a bad dream, just turn around, stand up to it, and say, I'm not afraid. And it'll just go away just like that. And so then Will, in Stranger Things, tries that and gets like just mind-meltingly blasted by an evil alien, to the point where it like ruins him permanently. It's like, that's what it reminded me of. Like, oh, just you don't have to worry about that bad thing at the back of your mind. That's not real. And Lynch is saying, like, not only is it real, not only is that thing not your imagination, but if you take just 20 steps outside of your normal happy place, like, say, the inside of Winky's Diner, if you just walk for 2 minutes from wherever you are now, you can touch hell. You can touch the, like I used to live in San Diego, and for a little while I lived downtown. And downtown San Diego is homeless people piled on top of other homeless people. And so, yeah, like most of us know from just regular life experience that really in 2 minutes from wherever you are now, you can walk to where someone is either choosing or being forced to live like some kind of animal. Yeah. And that is part of the practical point of the Winky's Diner scene, is that the world of decay and chaos and violence and darkness is literally just a stone's throw away from the world of regular, bright human interactions. So
that is so relatable, because for a while in San Diego, I lived in Point Loma. And for those of you unfamiliar with that area, it's a nice area. It's a nice place to live, and I liked living there. 1 mile away from it is this place called Sports Arena Boulevard. It's, if you drive on the main road to Point Loma, if you drive out of there and hit Sports Arena Boulevard, the best comparison I can make to Sports Arena Boulevard is fucking Fury Road. Like, you go there, and there are people. They'll just pull their pants down and spray shit on your car, and then keep walking. They'll, somebody will be screaming racial slurs at nothing in particular. It is a nightmare. Ironically, that's where the Seas Candy is. So the reason why it's like that is because there's like a public health center there. And by the way, I am not trying to disparage the homeless. I do have a lot of sympathy for them. They found themselves in a really difficult place, but that kind of lends to what you're saying about
Yeah.
no matter where you are, there's a nightmare not that far away.
There's a whole spate of new books coming out about this not unprecedented, but now at a record high economic phenomenon called the working homeless. The number of Americans who have, full-time regular jobs and can't live anywhere. So yeah, when we talk about homelessness, it's a structural problem, and fuck the powers that be for creating it in the first place.
Absolutely.
But that being said, the guy in the David Lynch thing, the burned man or whatever, he's not a homeless guy. He's like a demon.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's some kind of metaphysical malignancy that is like I can't remember whether it was Dan or whoever at Winky's Diner, but they're like, all the darkness in the world is being caused by this guy. Like, it's not just that there's a dude that's bad that's behind here, it's that somehow his aura is radiating out into the universe and making bad shit happen. And indeed, like, there's a scene where the burned man or whatever has the blue box. So Richard, what the fuck is the blue box? What's the blue key? What the fuck?
Before, I just want to say one last thing about that scene. The Burn Man's actually played by a woman, funny enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same lady that played the nun, Bonnie Aarons. So if you've ever seen The Nun, the movie fucking sucks. But her image and her face is very severe. I imagine she'd be like the witch from Snow White or something. She's got a very spooky face. And I don't feel bad saying that because she's made a shit ton of money because of it. But anyways.
Well, I've seen some of the behind the scenes footage where they're putting like the makeup on her and they're like, smiling and they got their arms around each other, like the cast and David Lynch. It's sort of like the scene where like Sigourney Weaver is like shaking hands with the xenomorph from Alien. Like the dude is like fully in costume. Like those are great. I love that shit. Anyway.
So anyways, the blue box, you're right, is a good place to continue this. So honestly, I'm not going to talk that much about Adam, the director. There's some funny scenes. Maybe we'll get into it, but we should really just fixate on Betty, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed actress, Rita, amnesiac. So after they find the blue box, they start just living together like roommates. She realizes that Rita's not particularly dangerous, and they also start to develop an attraction to one another. So there's this scene where they go to that diner. And Betty hears a name that sounds Rita hears a name that's somewhat familiar to her. And so they think, oh, that might be a clue to unlocking who you are. And they find out it's the name of an actress. So they look up her name and address in the yellow pages. That's an old reference. And they find her address. They end up going there. Long story short, they find her corpse in a scene that is very spooky. Rita ends up having a mental breakdown afterwards. I don't blame her because it is a very creepy looking corpse. It doesn't look like a fresh, just pale skin or whatever. It looks like a woman who died and has probably been there for a week. Decay is set in. It's very scary. The first thing they do when they go into the house is hold their breath because the smell is so awful. And Rita, they end up going back to Betty's apartment, and Rita has a mental breakdown and starts cutting her hair. And Betty soothes her. And Rita looks up and she's like, oh, I destroyed my beautiful hair. And Betty's like, don't worry, I've got, for some reason, a blonde wig that looks just like my hair. I don't know why I need it, but I've got this blonde wig. And she puts that on. And by the way, that's an interesting thing that I want to mention. I don't even know what it represents. Maybe it's just anher
hey, have you ever seen the Ingmar Bergman movie Persona? Because
no.
Okay, so real quick, Lynch, in his influences, he cites Ingmar Bergman. Bergman is awesome. Bergman was also into the very topsy-turvy world of like, he was like the first guy, along with Hitchcock and sort of Fellini, to like try and put psychoanalysis like into movies and to really run with that as, how the how people work operating system. And so he made this very experimental movie called Persona, which is about a woman who is in like a mental health asylum, and she is, instead of being kept there for treatment, she's sent to this remote like hut or cabin with her mental health worker, who is this woman that's a lot like her. And they also have like kind of a lesbian romance. It's more
Spoiler,
prototype.
Will.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's but those two have like a bit of a lesbian romance. It's more implicit because that was like 1966, you know?
Yeah.
But then there's also this question of like, are there really two people here, or is this one woman just the imagination of the other woman? So David Lynch totally saw that and then mapped it through his little mental vortex onto Rita and Betty. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
That part makes sense. What I was going to talk about was David Lynch seems to have this fixation on brunettes going blonde and vice versa, because the same thing, like you mentioned, happens in Lost Highway. And I don't know why I don't know what the significance to that is. Once again, I think it might just be another metaphor for change and becoming a different person. But he loves it when a brunette or a blonde trades hair. For some reason, that is an image that he thinks is very important. But anyways, so she puts the wig on. Some more time passes, and at some point, Rita, by the way, has been sleeping on the couch. And Betty tells her, "You're like, yeah, you don't have to sleep on the couch. You can sleep here in the bed." And he's like, "Oh, okay." She goes there, and of course, she takes her tits out with the wig on, and they're looking
roommates. I mean,
that's I know when I was staying at your house, I took my tits out when I put on the Ted wig, when I put on the Will wig. I remember you and I found a dead body in the woods, and I had a panic attack and shaved my already short hair into a perfect horseshoe-shaped bald spot. And you said, "Oh, I could fix that," and you gave me your hairpiece.
What part of "we never speak of this again" did you not understand?
Well, we're doing this remotely, so you don't have a gun pointed at my head this time. So
no, just your GPS coordinates and the interface for a Reaper drone. So yeah.
Well, I'm gonna paint a portrait of you as like an eldritch monster throughout this podcast. I'm just gonna like lay the seeds down of you just being this supernatural evil that haunts me.
I mean, I'll accept being evil as long as I can just be important. I think that's
fair.
That's how it breaks down for most people. It's like, make me an eldritch monster. I don't care, but at least let me matter.
Will, I think Eyes Wide Shut's about you. If that's what you think, you're just like, I'll be as evil as possible. I just need power. I need influence.
No, I don't. I don't think I could ever have too much of a talent for like that type of evil, because that type of evil always involves bossing people around and telling them what to do and like running shit. And I absolutely hate management. I hate telling anyone what to do. I hate thinking about other people in terms of what they're supposed to be fucking doing. So I would never have any skill with that. No.
Anyways, let's get this show on the road. You asked me about the blue box. I'll get us there. So Rita and Betty, Rita disrobes. They go in. They're looking at each other, and they end up having sex. But an important thing to note is it's very innocent, it's very tender, it's very slow and romantic, and this will come into play later. So that happens, and now they're closer, they're more involved, and they go to sleep. Now, in her sleep, Rita starts saying "silencio, silencio, 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 silencio," and then she says, "What is it?
No,
silencio, no hay banda, no hay banda,
hay orquesta."
And, obviously Betty wakes up because it's freaky as shit, but it clicks. She's like, we need to go out. We need to get out. It's like 2 a.m. There's going to be nobody out there. Oh, also, by the way, the mob has been stalking them. That's why she says it's 2:00. We can get out there now. We'll be safe. And they coincidentally find this club, which is called Club Silencio, which is set in blue neon lights. And, keep in mind, audience, blue means dreaming. So they go there. And don't forget the blue box and the triangular blue key. They sit down, and there's this play. I'm going to be honest, on rewatching it, it's a little pretentious. But
no, I like it. I love that shit at Club Silencio. I remember the first time I watched that. It reminded me of that Magritte painting, This Is Not a Pipe, right? Where it's the picture of the pipe, and then he writes under, "It's not a pipe." So the whole thing that's going on there is he's just showing this is a movie, man. This is not real. This is a recording. And I think that I'm going to let you finish doing the plot before I talk more about why that is in there in the first place. But there's a reason. There's a reason for that shit. Yeah.
So oh, by the way, sorry. I've said that there was a blue box and a blue key. That's not true. There's just the blue box. So they watch this scene unfold where there's a man on stage and he's very animated, he's very articulate, and he's saying, there's no, well, the quote that Rita said, silencio, no hay banda, no hay orchestra. In English, it's Spanish. In English, it means silence, there is no band, there is no orchestra. And so he's saying that as you hear the sound of people playing trumpets and stuff, but nobody's there. At some point, a guy comes out and plays the trumpet for real. He takes it off his mouth, and you can still hear the trumpet playing. Also, weirdly enough, up in the stands, there's this lady who looks like she's from Victorian England who has this giant blue Marge Simpson wig. So once again, just the color blue, it's dreaming. And suddenly, Betty starts shaking and vibrating. And I'll go into what I think that might mean. So she starts shaking and shaking and shaking, and then it goes quiet, and Rita reaches into her purse, and finally there's the key. So they say, oh, shit, cool. And so they go back to their apartment. They don't les out this time. Instead...
okay, hold on. There is one tiny correct... I don't think this matters for the record, but they start by finding the key. That's what's in her purse originally is the key. And then when they're at the theater, they open it and they're like, oh, there's the box. So they get the key first, then the box. Like I said, I don't think it fucking matters, but that's what happened.
The point, the thing that matters is that they had one and not the other leading into this. So they go back to the apartment and Betty exits the room and Rita takes it and she pushes the triangular key into the box. I kind of wonder if David Lynch made that too, because it's pretty cool looking. Yeah. She twists it, she opens it up, and then the camera zooms into the black abyss of this little blue box, and you see the box fall to the floor. Rita's gone. Betty goes in there. She opens it up, looks at it, gets flushed down in the blue box toilet. She's gone. And so...
I am loving the idea of it as like a cosmic toilet.
It is a cosmic toilet.
Yeah.
So now Betty wakes up in her bed. But it's kind of weird. Like I said, this entire movie, she's just been this positive, bright woman who's she just sees the good in things. She wants to help people. She's hopeful for her career as an actress. When she wakes up, she doesn't wake up in her apartment, the one that we've been used to. She wakes up in the apartment of the dead woman. And she gets up and she has these dark circles under her eyes. The lighting is darker as well. There's just this weird vibe where she looks like she's waking up from the worst hangover she's ever had.
Well, let me interject this one thing, which is there's this other character named the Cowboy, which we see a little bit with the director. And then the Cowboy comes back to her corpse right here and says something like, it's time to wake up, pretty girl. And then she comes back to life.
If I may, I want to go on a little tangent so I can talk about Adam the Cowboy and something else. I'll keep it brief.
Whatever. Yeah.
So I mentioned at the top that there's this director named Adam, who is the one making a movie that Betty really wants to be in. And he's running into these issues. This is another giant middle finger to producers. One of the earliest scenes you see him in, he goes into this boardroom and people are trying to explain to him why he has to cast this actress that he does not give a shit about. He's a director with a vision. There are things that he wants for this movie, and they're telling you, you don't get to choose. She's the one.
This boardroom scene is so great. It's fucking great.
It's so awesome. Because the writing for the dialogue, I'm not going to lie. By the way, bear in mind, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Is so bad. Like I said, it's so bad.
But every once in a while, it crosses over to like it's so bad it's good territory. Like the Cowboys lines when he's talking to Adam. Or
I'm going to get there. Okay. No, I thought you were going to say it. So he goes to this boardroom and a producer sits down and people are talking to him like he's Stalin or like he's like the emperor, where one wrong move and you'll get your head cut off. At some point he says, I want coffee or I want espresso. And they bring it in, gingerly set it in front of him. And everybody except for Adam is so tense. Adam, he's very 2000s. He's like 2000 cool, 1999 cool, where he's got his sports shades on, his hair up like James Gunn.
I thought of PTA a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody else is just bending over backwards for this guy. They set the espresso in front of the producer. He very slowly takes a sip, and his expression doesn't change. If this was in another director's hands, he would have spit it out and been like, ugh. He gently, after he sips it, he gently holds up the napkin and just kind of lets it fall out of his mouth into it. He's so disgusted. He looks like he's about to gag. And this is the bad dialogue part. They're like, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm so sorry, sir. And the exact quote is out of nowhere. And it just feels weird in the scene. One of the guys goes, that is considered one of the finest espressos in the world, sir. And it felt like something that Tommy Wiseau would have written.
Well, they were freaked out because they knew that he was like this, where he was super fucking particular about the espresso, and so they were just sweating fucking bullets because they knew he was going to do something crazy.
Yeah.
And so he like just not even spits it out, but just like opens his mouth and just lets it like dribble out onto this napkin. It's really disgusting. And it's one of those things, it reminded me of like some of the shit Lyndon Johnson used to do, where it's like one of the most basic power moves to show that you're the big dog is that you do something that is just totally obscene in a meeting, and like nobody can call you on it. Like I remember this one time I was interviewing to join this lab at U Chicago, and it was a neuroscience lab, and it was ran by a guy that was, I'm really gonna try and not say his name or anything, but he was seen as extremely brilliant, but like beyond eccentric. So I was interested in his stuff. So I come to this meeting, and it's like me, another PI in the lab with him, and then like a couple grad students, and then just a few other people. And we're all sitting around, and we're just like talking about what the lab's going to do next week. And I swear to God, I can see most of his underwear. The guy who runs the lab. He is sitting there with his shorts like pretty much around his ankles in an office chair. I can see, again, like 90% of his tidy whities. And everyone else is just acting like this isn't fucking happening. This is one of the smartest people in the world. He's just sitting here like Captain Underpants, like unbuttoned shirt, like, or like a button-up shirt with like the buttons not aligned, and then his pants so low, like he's ventilating his nutsack. And
we have to get to that point, dude. We have to make like Hemlock Incorporated a real thing, so we can just show up to meetings in our boxers and just watch people attempt to not acknowledge it.
I'm gonna start doing interviews like with nothing on underneath, and then like stand up in the middle of the interview and just like walk around my apartment and then sit down like nothing happened. That's like an LBJ move. That's like shit Lyndon Johnson used to do.
We're gonna be in Zoom meetings, and I'm gonna have like a blazer on, and like a V-neck. I'll be talking. I'll stand up. I'm just wearing boxers, and I scratch my testicles, and then I sit back down. I only stand up so people have to watch me do it.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about the boardroom scene is the guy who spits out the espresso is Angelo Badalamenti.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. I actually didn't know that at all. That's super fun. So there's one, before we get to the cowboy, there's one more scene I want to mention. So Adam, the director, the 1999 cool guy, he drives back home. He's so fucking pissed off that he's losing control over his movie. And he goes back home and finds his wife in bed with another man. Will, do you remember who that man is?
Billy Ray Cyrus.
It's Billy Ray, fucking pre-Hannah Montana Billy Ray Cyrus.
This is one of the funniest scenes ever. Is when he walks in and sees his wife in bed with Billy Ray Cyrus, and they're both just like, they know he's in the house, so they're just sitting there waiting for him to open the door. And he opens the door, and his wife looks so annoyed with him. Like, I can't believe you fucked this up for me. And then he like makes eye contact with Billy Ray Cyrus, and Billy Ray just goes, "It's just easier to pretend you didn't see it, Yeah.
When Billy Ray Cyrus is so funny in that scene. So obviously Adam, he doesn't scream. He just walks over, grabs her jewelry box, and starts walking to his garage. And I wrote a line down from Billy Ray Cyrus that I really liked. She's screaming at him. She's so fucking pissed that he interrupted her fucking Billy Ray Cyrus. And while she's screaming, you just hear Billy Ray Cyrus say, "He's probably upset, Lorraine."
Yeah. The funniest thing about this scene is that Billy Ray tries to act like a maximally normal person, like the way you would act in this scenario. Like at first he feels bad for him, and then the director starts like getting
grabbing
physical or grabbing
wife,
and shaking his wife. And he's like, "That's no way to treat a lady," and then he beats the fuck out of him.
And then throws him out of his own house.
And and then the wife demands that he be thrown out of his own house, and Billy Ray's like, "I mean, you were beating her," and so he like throws him, back onto the driveway with his Porsche. Yeah.
So, anyways,
after pouring after Adam pours paint into her jewelry box.
Oh yeah, pink paint, which stains his blazer for the rest of the movie. He has, but it's such an iconic outfit. He's just got this black blazer on, and there's pink paint just splattered on it. It's kind of a cool look. But so one thing we forgot to mention during the boardroom is he ends up going upstairs afterwards and speaking to the executive producer, Mr. Rock. Who they're
this
standing...
is where it looked like the Twin Peaks like Black Lodge stuff.
Yeah, no, it looked like he was speaking to a fucking navigator from Dune. Like he walks up and there's just this giant glass window and this dim spotlight appears and you see this guy in a chair with like a regular body and a very small head. And he just keeps whispering things. And eventually Adam's like, "Fuck this shit. I'm going to do whatever I fucking want with this movie." Fun fact, Mr. Rock, the guy in the chair, is the man from someplace else in Twin Peaks. The guy with dwarfism who kind of walks in. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and then in Fire Walk with Me, he plays the left hand or whatever.
Yeah, well, it's weird. The spirits in Twin Peaks usually have like two different names, because he's the left hand and the man from another place, same person. It's kind of like there's another character who didn't show up in the movie called the Giant, which is just this guy with gigantism, but he's also called the Fireman for some reason. But anyways,
at any rate, it creates the idea that like all of Hollywood once again is ran by like some inscrutable shadowy cabal, or it's ran by these forces pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Now, what's interesting to think about is whether any of that shit is real or whether that shit is Betty's fantasy, which we'll get to later. Yeah.
Well, now I can get on the track and I can move us straight back to her waking up. So, because Adam, the director, says no, the mafia are pissed, and he got kicked out of his house, so he has to go to this kind of seedy motel. And the very friendly owner tells him, he's like, "Hey, you've got no more money in your bank account." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "No, you have no more money in your bank account." And he's like, "Well, I've got cash. I paid you in cash. What do you care?" And he's like, "People from your bank came here and said that you don't have any more money." And basically what he's alluding to is that the mafia came there and we're like, we're going to fuck him up if we see him. So he's super scared, but he ends up getting a message from his assistant. The same quote unquote bank guys talk to his assistant and they give him directions. They're like, "Drive outside of LA and go to this ranch and you're going to meet with somebody and he's going to tell you what you need to do." So he goes there and there's a lot of interesting lines, but he goes to this, it's at night. There's just one street light going down on the ranch.
I'm gonna dub in the whole conversation between him and the cowboy because I think it's worth listening to. Yeah.
So the last thing that he says to him, which is a line I really like, it's a very Lynch line. He says, basically what the cowboy says is, "You're gonna cast the woman we told you to." But he says it in he's kind of like eerie and weird and esoteric. And the last thing he says, which is such a good line, he's like, "Now, if you do a good job, you're gonna see me one more time. If you do a bad job, you're going to see me 2 more times." Now,
amazing threat.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And that kind of connects to Betty opening up the box, getting sucked in and waking up looking like shit. Because after she gets sucked into the box, Will mentioned, she wakes up as the cowboy kind of like leans through her door for no reason. These two characters have never interacted. The cowboy is clearly there to represent something or to be something supernatural. He leans in, knocks on the door, and just says like, "Hey, wake up." And then his little cowboy body slides away. And I'd like to point out, we just saw him one time, and that will connect to the threat he made and in ways I don't even necessarily entirely understand, but we can riff it out. So at this point, Betty's woken up and she goes to her door to hear knocking, and she opens the door and it's Rita. But for some reason, Rita doesn't call her Betty, even though that's how they've known each other this entire time. She calls her Diane. And you start to get this feeling that something's changed, that we're currently in a different place than how the rest of the movie has played out. One second. I'm going to look at my notes real quick. I'm trying to remember. Okay, yeah. So Rita now introduces herself as Camilla. Now, for the sake of continuity and for the people like listening, I'm just going to keep calling them Betty and Rita so they don't have to get used to two new names. But understand that now they're being called something else for some reason. So Betty looks like shit, and she and Rita end up making out and having sex again.
Correction. Naomi Watts never looks like shit in this movie.
Let me correct myself. Naomi Watts, I would stick a needle in my eye to have a conversation with her. She looks like shit compared to what she looked like before, which is grading pretty heavily on a curve.
She slipped from a 10 to a 9.4 is what is happening.
Yeah, she slipped from a 10 to a 9.9. What's the scene?
It's actually not a major scene. It's a scene where Adam is directing, that movie, which is about the 50s. And he's in the studio and he's screen testing the different actresses. And they all, their screen test is to come on and sing some doo-wop song from the 50s.
Okay.
And there's a lot of layers to that scene, and I want to talk about it. Not necessarily now, but just in general.
That makes a lot of sense because there's a parallel scene afterwards, which is seedier and grosser.
Right.
But I do think that's good to talk about because it also contains some of those 50 pop songs that reminded me when you were talking about the soundtrack of Blue Velvet in the last episode. So I think what we should do is I'm going to finish my thoughts on Betty and Rita having sex a second time because there's something that I noticed there. And then
I bet there was.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it was hard. It was hard when I lost my vision while I was busting, but eventually I came back to. And
Richard typed "girls kissing" into Google Images when he was 13, and he's never fucking came back from that.
I looked up big boobed lesbians once, and it destroyed my life forever. Anyways, so that's a good. I can lead us into that. So I was talking about how in this after the cowboy wakes up Betty. How Rita comes over. They're both now going by different names, which is kind of confusing if you haven't seen the movie before. And they end up having sex again. But something I noticed, the first time they slept together, I mentioned it was very tender, very, very gentle, very nice. In fact, there's a line in that first one where Betty looks at Rita and she's like, "Have you ever done this before?" And Rita's like, "I don't know." It's like they're both discovering something. It means a lot to both of them. This second time is like real sex, where it's just like they're both just people trying to make themselves feel good. I think in my notes I said sex is way seedier in real life. Like,
it's working class pharmaceutic sex where you're like, I just need to fuck to feel better, and we've got 17 minutes, and then I have to go to work, and so put your fucking hair back. We're doing this.
Yeah. And they do that, and a little bit of life comes back into Betty, because I mentioned that she kind of looked drained and tired, like she was hungover. And then Rita starts to leave again, and Betty freaks out. And basically, Rita breaks up with Betty, which is weird, because like I said, these are not the characters that we're familiar with. A lot's changed. Now, eventually, they end up going to... they're both still actresses, even though they're in this weird alternate world, which we'll explore a little bit later. And they go to work, and we're going to talk about that scene, but while they're acting, Betty gets very jealous of Rita and Adam, who's now an actor for some reason. They have a makeout scene that just makes Betty fume with anger. And it perfectly parallels a very different scene earlier on in the movie before Betty wakes up. Do you want to talk about that, Will?
Wait, I'm not sure I know which scene you mean.
I'm talking about the audition scene where they're doing the 50s music, the thing you want to talk about.
Oh,
that scene parallels this one, and then once you're done talking about that, we can pick up from here.
No, you finish your point and then I'll rant about my scene. Because
I'm
in my own head, I have like this perfectly polished marble statue of a thing I want to say about that scene. So just make whatever point you're making and then I'll go.
Well, I don't have a point yet. I think that like go on your explore that topic all you want, because I think that it'll be really easy to segue that back into it and have it
Okay.
make sense. Because
So
really quickly, before we go into that, from this point forward, audience, we're going to start exploring the parallels between the moments before and afterwards Rita and Betty get sucked into the box. And so just to explore that a bit more, we're going to jump back and talk about a scene that Will has a lot of thoughts on.
Okay, so the scene is that the director, Adam Kesher, is apparently making a movie which is about like 50s music or 50s aesthetic or something. And he's screen testing all these different actresses for playing the role of like this pop starlet from the 50s. And so we're in the studio with him and we see the set and we see where the producers are sitting smoking their cigars in the darkness. And then, he's bringing on one actress after another to lip sync this, 50s song. And first of all, what you're seeing there is the no hay orquesta, no hay banda thing, where they are pretending to sing, but really it's a recording. Right. So all they're doing is they're kind of trying to fit in with this pre-established image, and they're being graded on how well they can mold themselves into this thing that already exists. So the other thing that's going on that's very literal is that you have a director in the late 90s who's making a movie about the 50s. And that should be familiar to us from, Blue Velvet and so on, where there is, just this sense in which the aesthetic tastes today, the way that 50s movies look when they're made today, creates our imagination of what these things were really like far more than anything that was actually from the time period. And so what you're seeing in the depth of that shot is you are seeing the Hollywood machinery in its act of image creation. It's creating an image of what the 50s were, and it's producing that as a commercial product. And so what you're seeing is Lynch on the one hand acknowledging that what we do here is we create illusions. We create attractive fictions, and we make up lies essentially about what the past was and about what's going on. And even this movie that you're watching now is a version of this same lie. I mean, no hay banda, no hay cinema. None of this is real. No hay podcasta. It's all a recording. And what a recording is a thing which is fundamentally dead, springing into action and imitating something that's alive. Imitating the 1950s, imitating genuine, female sexual attraction or whatever. And so there is that going on the one hand. But the other thing, and the thing that I realized by listening to the David Lynch playlist over and over, and especially that song 16 Reasons, is that even in all of this, right, where there's the mob and there's violence and there's intimidation and Camilla Rhodes is going to get this no matter what.
Camilla Rhodes, by the way, is Rita. It's her real life counterpart.
Right. And so amidst all this corruption and all the layers of exploitation and unfairness, when actors and singers and writers and painters, when they get into this machinery and they get their chance, they still try to make something really pure and really beautiful out of it. Because like if you listen to the singing in any of these, like doo-wop songs, what strikes you most of all is the incredible purity, how amazingly heartfelt all of this is. And it's like, what does it mean to create something that really is heartfelt and sorrowful and passionate and pure, and it's being made by the most infernal machine imaginable, right? And it's like, what Lynch is saying there is like, when you listen to a song like a Roy Orbison song from the 50s or 60s, or when you listen to, the Ronettes or whatever, you are hearing two things at once. You are hearing the amazingly pure, heartfelt, childlike desire of these artists to create and pass something on. And you are also seeing and hearing the dark prism of the infernal Hollywood machine that was required to produce that thing. And so, I'm just going to stop there with that scene, because I think that is the point that David Lynch has been kind of working through all his films his entire life to kind of make, is like these two things, the infernal machine of Hollywood and the total purity of artists, there's like an overlap. They form a Venn diagram with each other, and everything that we experience as art is in this overlap. And so anyway, that's my point.
I am so glad you said that when you did, and we put that in there when you did, because that is a perfect segue to the conclusion of the movie and examining it. So that happens before, and it's like Will says, it's in the scene, it's the 50s, it's like diner music, it's fun, it's poppy, and everybody is trying to achieve their dreams. 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 It's all a dream. So when I left off, Rita and Betty, or now Diane, who's Betty, and Camilla Rhodes, who's Rita, they have kind of messy, impersonal sex, and Rita leaves. And Betty/Diane is so angry because it's heavily implied that she's being broken up with. She later goes to this party where you see Adam, and it turns out that Adam and Rita/Camilla are now engaged. And Betty is seething. I think at this point I made my point. I'm going to start calling Betty Diane. So Diane is seething. And in the next scene, she goes to the same diner where we got the scary homeless demon. And she's talking to a hitman that appeared in kind of a humorous scene earlier on in the movie. And she's hiring him to kill Camilla. She's a scorned lover. She's angry and she wants Camilla dead. And the guy says something interesting. He says, hey, once this is all over and I've done this job, you'll find, and he holds up a blue key. He's like, you'll find this key in your apartment. And it cuts to her sitting in her apartment on the verge of tears looking at this key. And at that point, let's get into like what this movie means. Actually, one moment.
There's even one other little dangling mystery, because when he hands her the key in the diner, she says, what does the key open? And he just starts laughing hysterically. And it turns out there is something that the key opens, but that's what we're going to build up to. So
yeah. So she's looking at this, and there's a very uncomfortable scene where she starts masturbating and crying. And which, by the way, props to I'm drawing a blank on the actress's name. Props to Naomi Watts, because it's kind of like Isabella Rossellini. That's a lot to ask from an actress, and she nails it. So she's doing that, and she starts to experience like psychosis. Her two elderly grandparents start laughing and laughing, and she starts seeing these visions. She has a vision that she walks to that alleyway, and the homeless demon is just sitting there and staring at her, holding a paper bag, and he drops it and the box falls out. And then for some reason, two little miniatures of her parents, presumably her parents or her aunt and uncle, walk out, and they're laughing and they're laughing.
It was the couple that she met when she was Betty at the beginning on the flight over. So apparently uninvolved people, just these two random old people who are also super menacing because they get into a limo and then they just have this rictus grin for like 30 seconds, and it just feels very disturbing.
That's one way to look at it. This is, by the way, back at the beginning of the movie when she gets dropped off. It looks like, on the one hand, it is kind of menacing. On the other hand, it looks like actors pretending to be happy and like super up. And that kind of goes back into the fact that we mentioned the opening's kind of corny. The way I interpreted that is they're way too happy, where it's like fake and it feels like performative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the homeless demon drops the bag, the blue box falls out, they come out as miniatures and they're laughing. Then eventually Rita's there and she's losing her mind. She sees them walk out of like a Tom and Jerry little hole in the wall that a mouse would come in. And out of nowhere, they open the door and they're laughing at her and approaching her, and she's screaming. She's running from them. And it's very unsettling. She runs into her room, opens up her drawer, grabs a revolver, and just ends her life. And suddenly the room starts getting enveloped in fog, and eventually you see the cowboy walk through it. And that is the ending of the movie. At this point, by the way, I'd just like to mention, like I said before, that's the second time we see him. And you know you don't want to see the cowboy a second time. Now, let's start unpacking what all that shit means, because we just threw a bunch of bullshit. I mean, we've basically already told the audience what it means, but what I took away from this is the popular interpretation of what the movie is, and I kind of subscribe to that, is that Betty/Diane is in reality a miserable failing actress. She's trying to land roles. She's kind of in love with a more successful, more beautiful actress, and nothing's going right for her, and she's slowly succumbing to her own depression and rage. And what the first half of the movie was, it's more than half. What the first like 2/3 of the movie is, before they both get sucked into the blue box toilet, is Betty/Diane fantasizing about a different life, a life where, you know, Rita/Camilla is an amnesiac that she has control over, that she's around, that admires her and loves her, that their love is innocent, that she's having success in her job. And it's not that ambiguous, because something I didn't mention is that the opening scene of the movie, well, first you get like some people dancing to some music, but as soon as that cuts out, it cuts to a point of view shot of a person opening a door, walking into a bedroom, and lying face first into a pillow. And then that's when Betty is introduced to the movie. And yeah, this entire time, more likely than not, it perfectly bounces off of what you said about that scene where people are rehearsing music for the 50s, where we're leaning into something more beautiful. It also leans into Lost Highway, because effectively we're seeing the past from a completely subjective lens. You know, it's as if the videotape doesn't exist and we're just in our own memories, where we can remember the pure moments so vividly, to the point where we can distill all the bad until the past just feels like a series of amazing experiences. And for people that are filled with regret, who feel like they've failed, that can become a very addictive delusion to remain in. You know, looking at the past, romanticizing it, whether it was good or not. For example, you mentioned romanticizing the 50s, right? Because there were those times. There was fun, pure music. There was dancing. There were diners and milkshakes. But also, there were certain ethnicities in the United States that couldn't vote. The 50s was
little
not
details
a good time.
like that. Yeah, right.
Yeah, little quote unquote details. Like, the 50s was a bad time for most people in the United States. And there are just people that have the luxury of being able to look back on it very fondly. For example, people like us who weren't alive then. And that's kind of where Betty/Diane is trapped. She's trapped in the delusion of not only the past, but also a present that she wished had happened. Nothing about the first movie is factual at all. It's not that it's fake, but it's where Diane/Betty needs to live to stay alive. And when she ends up arranging for the murder of Camilla/Rita, she can no longer go back there. That's why there's that scene where, as she's masturbating and thinking about Rita, she realizes that is now something she can never go back to, even in her fantasies. Because even in her fantasies, now they've been polluted by the idea that she effectively killed Rita and Diane. I'm sorry, Rita and /Camilla. And another thing is that kind of a parallel. I actually saw some guy talk about this. Somebody introduced the idea that the point where that becomes undeniable is when she's at the play, where the guy's talking about Silencio. What's her name? A singer named Rebecca Del Rio performs a song named Llorando, which is really good. She's a beautiful singer. But I mentioned before that Diane starts shaking at some point near the end before they find the key. And somebody compared that to, like, well, maybe that's kind of like the climax. Like, in some ways, the first 2/3 of the movie are a masturbatory fantasy produced by Betty/Diane.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of support for that as the basic idea of the movie. That there's a compensatory, dream that Betty has, Betty/Diane has, where, and it goes back to David Lynch's, I think, lifelong obsession with telling stories about women that would normally just get erased.
Mhm.
Where if I said, to just about anybody who is a Hollywood director, I want you to make a movie about a young actress who moves from, Canada. I think she said she was from Ontario or whatever, moves from Ontario to LA and then, experiences life in Hollywood and becomes an actress. 97% of directors, no matter what happens to that character, at the end, she's successful.
Yeah.
At the end, it has worked out. Maybe she's endured sexual harassment, obscurity. Maybe she's had to be a starving artist or wait tables or count on a lucky break or do something corrupt or violent. But if you give most people the assignment of talk about what it's like to be an actress who makes the big jump, into the tall buildings and bright lights of LA, it's like, well, there will be some adversity and then basically it'll work out. Lynch says no. Like, actually what happens 99% of the time is we create the Diane character. We create a character who tells herself that she's just going to wait tables for a few summers while she, gets her resume around, and then she's going to get a TV show, and then she's going to get a movie, and then whatever. And what actually happens is you wait tables until you're 59 years old, and then you're miserable. And so the Diane is somebody who has this totally ambivalent relationship, both with the director, Adam Kesher, and then with Rita. So she loves Rita and is attracted to her, but mostly she's jealous of her. She wants to be her. She wants to be the star. She wants to be the one that gets to marry the director, because she's also, I think it's implied, pretty attracted to Adam. Like the scene where Naomi Watts, while she's still Betty, comes in and sees Adam Kesher, and there's this prolonged eye contact and so on. Like, so it's a love triangle, right?
Yeah.
But Rita gets the better end of all of it, right? She gets to fuck everybody. She eventually gets the success with the film. She goes on to be his wife, and now she's set for life. And Betty just feels like a failure. And I think that what happens is, right, so she orders the murder. Now, flashback to the very first scene where Camilla is in the back of the limo, and then the guy pulls out the gun, right, and is about to murder her. And think to yourself, I'm seeing the hit that Diane ordered. But then, right, this crazy ex machina thing happens where there's these two, cars full of teenagers that are speeding and screaming and hooting and hollering, and they foil the assassination attempt, right? And then Camilla gets away, and the rest of the plot happens where she has amnesia and she ends up, just in Betty's house without any adult supervision. And then they go on a quirky little adventure, and then they fuck, and then whatever. And it's like, what that is Betty dying of the guilt of ordering this murder and imagining a version where not only does that not happen, miraculously the murder doesn't go through, but now, this woman who I'd been obsessed with, who basically dropped me or pushed me out the airlock, now she doesn't even remember being a great and powerful woman. She's just like my little amnesiac silly putty doll to play with. And, we're going to have this romantic relationship, and we're going to be super successful, both of us. And so that is like the one of the first scenes in the movie is the camera basically steady cam walking through the bedroom and then zooming in on like a red pillow or a red bed. That is Diane's bed. That is the bed that the corpse is found on. So basically what we're seeing is her throwing herself on the bed and like pushing her mind into this imaginary sphere where none of the bad shit happened and she can be whole again. So that's.
Well, and it's funny, just to zoom out, and I'm going to do the dreaded thing, Will, and I'm going to talk about production.
God fucking damn it.
So at the time, I think you'll like this. So at the time, Naomi Watts in interviews mentioned that she was really grateful for this role because her career had kind of dried up a little bit. She had acted, but she wasn't the Naomi Watts we know quite yet. She was actually worried that her career was going to fail. And it's not surprising that the character of Betty / Diane is so crushed by the Hollywood machine, because for all we know, even though she's a failed actress, she could have been a good one. She's definitely beautiful, but it's so competitive. And the reason why I say that is because when David Lynch was initially making Mulholland Drive as a show. He casted Naomi Watson. Who played Rita again?
Laura Herring or Haring.
Laura Herring. So he casted both of them almost from the get-go. And that was a studio note. That was another thing that the studio didn't like about David Lynch. Do you want to know what the studio's note was about both those actresses, Will?
What?
That they're too old.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Which, by the way, anybody listening, don't even look up a picture of them at the time. Look up a picture of them now. They are beautiful women. And they were beautiful women then, they still are. The fact that the studios were like, nah, get somebody who's 18 in it. It's just
it's
disgusting.
Slimy. And
yeah.
I mean, even if like you're just being pure physical beauty, I mean, it's like to have that as the criticism. Wow. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, well, and that's why I really liked what you said when you mentioned that Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive are kind of mirror one another. It's the experiences, it examines masculinity and femininity and how the world treats it and how they treat it back and how those things might be corrupted. It's when I watched both those movies recently again, they really felt like twin movies. Like they took place in the same universe. They had the same vibe and they had very similar messages, which, outside of the whole masculinity, femininity thing, is about how success in LA can destroy people. Success and a lack thereof, because there is just a malignant, cancerous entity that hovers over LA. LA is an inherently evil place, I think. I think that's what David Lynch feels. It's an inherently corrupted, and it is Gomorrah. it is Sodom.
I mean, an unrelated movie that kind of fits the theme is the Marilyn Monroe movie with Ana de Armas.
Oh yeah,
it's called Blonde. I initially gravitated towards that movie for, I'll admit, some pretty base reasons. Namely, the promise that Ana de Armas would be like fully naked for like 60% of the movie, which is true, by the way. But let me caution you with an additional fact, audience, if you've not seen that movie, which is, despite the fact that Ana de Armas, who plays Marilyn Monroe in that movie, is fully naked for a lot of it, there is only one scene, which lasts for about 2 minutes, which can be called properly erotic. All of the other scenes where she is naked, you just feel this horrifying, crushing sense of guilt and pain and rage at the situation that's happening. And it's clear that Marilyn Monroe in her life was like a sponge that just soaked up an unbelievable amount of suffering and pain. And you have to remember that as much as either the historical Marilyn Monroe or the Ana de Armas in the movie, as much abuse as they experienced from, male producers, male directors, in Marilyn Monroe's case, the fucking president of the United States, JFK.
Yeah.
Right. As much as she suffered, on the scale of other women in Hollywood at the time, she came out with way more and suffered way less. Right. Like, she was one of the quote unquote the lucky ones, right? The unlucky ones are people like Diane, who endured all the same problems, the sexual harassment, the being passed around like a fucking object by these creepy older men, but didn't end up, wealthy and independent, ended up working as a waitress at Winkies and wanting to kill herself. So.
Well, and I think if you want to zoom back into David Lynch, I think that's something that makes David Lynch really unique, is that David Lynch is one of the most famous filmmakers of all time. I mean, he's not a Steven Spielberg or something, but everybody at least knows his name. You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who didn't at least recognize it. But David Lynch managed to be that iconic while also being kind of an alien in Hollywood, but while kind of existing outside of that. And I think that's part of the reason why. This is purely my own Diane fantasy or whatever, but I'd like to think that David Lynch saw that evilness, that horribleness of the Hollywood machine, and stayed outside of it and commented on it, because you just see it in so many of his movies, him blowing the whistle. And also just David Lynch loves people who are in pain. Not in like a voyeuristic way, but in a compassionate way. That's something that really made me like Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, is that the only reason that movie was made is because David Lynch genuinely loved the Laura Palmer character and loved what that represented. And when I was reading about, interviews with Lynch and other people associated with the movie, a lot of people reached out to Lynch, people that were victims of familial sexual violence and stuff, and said that the movie was this sort of catharsis for them. It was horrible, but it was like the first time they felt seen watching a movie, having that character represented. Because you mentioned earlier that for a lot of directors, they would, no matter how bad things get, eventually there'd be that scene where she, Laura Palmer stands up for herself and she says, "No, Leland and Bob, you dirty demon, I'm not going to do this anymore." And it's going to be like the end of It, where they're like, "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you." And then eventually Leland, dissolves like a snail hit by
Yeah,
his salt.
Voldemort is
then
defeated, and the good is restored in the world.
And then
so
Laura
on.
Palmer, it cuts 10 years later, and now she's a case manager for battered women. No, that's not what happens at all. What happens is in the movie is what happens most of the time, which is that people just get destroyed by the evil of the world. And it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I'm just allowing that fact to wash over me. And again, cutting back to that terrifying fucking scene in Stranger Things where Will gets possessed by the smoke demon. And it's like, maybe the lesson there is that if you try to stand up to evil on your own, you get fucking bowled over, at the very least. But yeah, I mean, I think with Lynch, right, it's all about embedding the pure and the wholesome in there with the grotesque and disturbing and so on, where, Hollywood is this infernal machine, but it is also really a place where beautiful things are made. And, what was funny about watching the scene where they're at the Club Silencio and the dude is making, the thunder and the lightning bolts appear, and then we're watching Naomi Watts like have like a little bit of a fit or a seizure, and we're thinking like, oh, how stupid, she's all freaked out over, this thing that she knows is fake, and it's like, we are watching a thing we know is fake, and we are gripping the chair, and we are, freaked out about the mystery man, and there's knowing that it's an illusion actually allows you to become even more deeply invested in it. Because you're like, I know very well that none of this is real. I know very well that this is all someone's imagination, which is precisely why I'm now going to treat it as if it's the codex for life and psychology, right? Well,
and also I think there's a reason why human beings produce entertainment like that and they produce fiction. I think so I remember reading about developmental psychology when I was, when I was taking a class on psychology, and they talked about how when little kids, they play wrestle or they stand up and they bounce around or they try to imitate their parents, play is a very important part of a child's development because it allows them to practice being human and develop those bonds in their mind. And so they can eventually grow up and become adolescents and eventually teens and adults and yada, yada, yada. It's how a human learns how to be a human, is through play. And I think that entertainment and cinema and shows and music are ways that we continue to do that as adults, where we play pretend when we watch Mulholland Drive. We play pretend when we watch Lost Highway. And sure, a lot of the things that happen in those movies are unrealistic, but they represent things that we intrinsically understand. Feelings, angers, fears. They represent those things and they give us a platform to feel those things in a relatively safe environment where they're not actually there. But we can explore things that we might not see in our day-to-day life. And I think that because of that, the movies that David Lynch make are, as dumb as it sounds, kind of important. I know that they moved me, and when somebody is truly, or at least when I'm truly moved by something emotionally, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. there are video games that have moved me emotionally, and even though a video game is kind of bullshit, the fact that it moved me at the time helped me move into the next phases in my life. And it's kind of just what you said, which is that sure, the world that churns out these products, these movies, these books, whatever, is in of itself evil, but what it produces is important and beautiful sometimes, unless it's a shit movie. But we're not talking about shit movies. We're talking about movies we love from a man who is just truly incredible. And is
Yeah.
the first person I'd like to say, I think we can say, who gets the good role model stamp.
Yes, one big gold star for David Lynch, and the challenge is to not watch his movies as a manual for how to abuse women, but instead to watch his movies as a 360-degree panorama view of what abuse looks like, right? Like Lost Highway, it's a male fantasy. Mulholland Drive, it's a female fantasy. And so you see him. Inland Empire is even more experimental. Who can say what exactly it is? But he's triangulating all these different ways of, like, you know, the blind men touching the elephant, where it's like, oh, you know, this feels like a snake, and this feels like a rhinoceros, and this feels like a rock, and, you know. So Lynch has been feeling this object, which is the infernal machine of Hollywood and the lived experience of these actresses in it, you know, for a very long time. And he's kind of distilling this down into these series of just, like, basically fucking flashing images. Like, nominally there's a plot, nominally there's characters, but, like, you know, these really are kind of just flashing images. And much more important than any statement that you can make about Lynch's work, like it's about this or it represents that, is a feeling that you get when you watch it. Like, there's a feeling that you get when you're in the diner with Dan and he's describing his dream, where it feels like a hypnotic induction. It feels like, as you're listening to this guy describe this dream, that you're starting to dream, that you're starting to participate in this kind of trance or daydream. Or when it cuts to the scene where the director is talking to the cowboy at the ranch, and the cowboy accuses him of, it's the most philosophical scene in David Lynch. He accuses him essentially of not really thinking and just giving up answers to placate him.
I want to thank you for coming all the way up here to see me from that nice hotel downtown.
No problem. What's on your mind?
Well, now, here's a man who wants to get right down to it. Kind of anxious to get to it, are you?
Whatever.
A man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be. Is that something you might agree with?
Sure.
Now, did you answer because that's what you thought I wanted to hear? Or did you think about what I said and answer because you truly believe that to be right?
I agree with what you said. Truly.
What'd I say?
That a man's attitude determines to a large extent how his life will be.
So since you agree, you must be a person who does not care about the good life.
How's that?
Well, stop for a little second and think about it. Can you do that for me?
Okay. I'm thinking.
No, you're not thinking. You're too busy being a smart aleck to be thinking. Now I want you to think and stop being a smart aleck. Can you try that for me?
Look, where's this going? What do you want me to do?
There's sometimes a buggy. How many drivers does a buggy have?
One.
So let's just say I'm driving this buggy, and if you fix your attitude, you can ride along with me.
Okay.
I want you to go back to work tomorrow. You were recasting the lead actress anyway. auditioned many girls for the part. When you see the girl that was shown to you earlier today, you will say, "This is the girl." The rest of the cast can stay. That's up to you. But that lead girl is not up to you. Now you will see me one more time if you do good. You'll see me 2 more times if you do bad. Good night.
And, you know, you feel like something is tremendously important here. Like there's a transaction of like real existential significance. But the stupid, shitty English language is just like, you know, a thin wallpaper, you know, covering this thing over. And that if you could get beyond the words and you could get into the feeling or the gravity of the scene, that you would learn something really fucking interesting. And I think everyone should, if you haven't watched Lynch, you know, Mulholland Drive, yeah, is probably the masterpiece, is probably the place to start that makes sense. But the way David Lynch's movies make me feel is that they make me feel that enough to fuck me up for days, enough that I'm laying there in bed, you know, still seeing some of those images and trying to put the puzzle pieces together. It's rare that I really care about a piece of fiction, you know, beyond its immediate entertainment value. I'm a nonfiction guy. I like facts and research and the real world. I like literature. Yeah, Tips Fedora, sure, whatever. But like, you know, I'm one of those guys that thinks reality is more interesting than people's fantasies about it. But nonetheless, like this stuff to me, I think is classic and I think deserves to be watched well into the future. And so anyway, that's my little... That's everyone's lining up to make their little tribute to David Lynch. That's my little tribute to David Lynch. Yeah. So there. It's not much, but there.
Well, and that's why Will and I wanted to do this, because we do have, I have a lot of sincere love for what he did. And at the very least, the David Lynch that I saw through TV screens, and who knows what he was like when behind closed doors, but I really admire him. And, you know, we kind of mentioned off the top of the first episode, I think we mentioned in this one, unfortunately, David Lynch did pass away. But a nice thing I'd like to kind of end our series on is that, obviously, who the fuck knows? But I don't think David Lynch passed away with a lot of regrets or a sense that he didn't complete certain parts of his vision, because the last thing that he personally wrote and directed before he passed away was Twin Peaks: The Return. For those of you who liked Twin Peaks, and for those of you who don't know about it either, you know, after he made Twin Peaks: Fire Walk with Me, most people assumed that was the end of Twin Peaks. And like I said, that was his baby. Twin Peaks, I think, is one of the pieces of media that David Lynch was most intimately connected with in his life. And it died after that, you know. But through the persistence of his fan base, through its cult status as a show and a movie, eventually David Lynch got to come back, and the 3rd season fucks.
Let's fuck!
It is so good. Like it's really different. You know, there's a lot of like cherry pie and hot coffee in the first 2 seasons. The last season is pure Lynch. It's not only pure Lynch, but much like Blue Velvet, I think it's one of those projects where by the time it was finished, it was probably as close to David Lynch's original vision as it possibly could be. It connects to moments in Fire Walk with Me. You know, for example, like, you know, when David Bowie comes in at the beginning of Fire Walk with Me, and he's like, and we're not going to talk about Judy, in his terrible Southern accent.
And it makes no sense. And you're like, why is this here? Yeah.
Exactly. It connects in the 3rd season. All these little seeds like sprout. And there is a sense by the end of season 3 where it for the first time ever feels like a completed project. And then he got to pass away afterwards, you know? All I want to say is that I don't think David Lynch's life is a tragedy. I think it's something that makes me smile, and I think that he managed to get as much as he could out of it. And I think that he's a man that saw a lot of things that people don't, and was lucky enough and talented enough to translate that to film for all of our benefit.
Yeah, and I wish Mr. Lynch an auspicious transmission into the Bardo and a smooth reincarnation in the form of his choosing. And yeah, now audience, all you have to do is go out there and watch Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, at least a little bit of Inland Empire, the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with me, and then Twin Peaks The Return, and then you'll be ready to evaluate whether our podcast made any sense at all. So
yeah. And also, audience, I love Dune. It's probably my favorite book of all time. You can skip that movie. You can.
Yeah, that's why I left it out. There's also I've never seen this one, but there's one called The Straight Road, which is a G-rated, like, wholesome.
It's a Disney movie.
Yeah,
it's literally a Disney
movie about, an old man passing on his wisdom. So that one is interesting to me. But believe me, I love David Lynch, but I will not be watching another movie of his for at least a year or two.
Yeah, maybe more.
And that's my final comment. Rich, take us out.
One last thing I'd like to say is, near the end of his life, actually, no, it wouldn't have been necessarily there. It would have been 2017. After you've watched all those movies, if you have developed a sincere love for Lynch, like Will and I have, in 2017, he was in a movie called Lucky. He didn't direct it, he didn't produce it, but he acted in it. And funny enough, there's one of the actors that he worked with a lot. Something you'll find about Lynch is that he eventually builds up a group of actors that he absolutely adores. And one of them was a man by the name of Harry Dean Stanton. Will, in Fire Walk with Me, do you remember in the first 30 minutes when Chet Desmond goes to the trailer park and he talks to the trailer park owner and he tries asking her questions about Teresa Banks and he's like, oh, no, it's just more shit I gotta do.
Yeah. That guy was also the the cook or whatever in Alien. Yes. Uh-huh.
He was also the main character in an amazing movie called Paris, Texas, but that is a topic for another time. I got to close this up. So Lynch acts in this movie called Lucky, and the entire movie is about a man named Lucky, played by Harry Dean Stanton, who he never married, he doesn't have any kids, and he's starting to reach the end of his life. He's like in his 80s, and he lives in what looks like, I don't know, Joshua Tree, just some kind of like small desert community, maybe in New Mexico or something. And it's just kind of this meditation on death and the end of your life. And by the way, it's not a depressing movie, because Lucky, Harry Dean Stanton, he practices transcendental meditation, and the director of the movie loved Lynch, and that's why David Lynch ends up becoming an actor in it. And Lucky goes to this bar, and David Lynch plays this character who has this tortoise named President Roosevelt, and it almost feels like Lynch wrote his own character for this movie, because he's eventually, very tragically, President Roosevelt runs away, and David Lynch is very concerned about him. And at some point, Lucky's just so fucking sick of listening to David Lynch. He's so done listening to him bitch about this tortoise that he's like, it's just a fucking tortoise, dude. Like, well, come on. And David Lynch is like, President Roosevelt is more than just a tortoise. Do you understand the average lifespan of a tortoise? He's older than I am. He's accumulated all this experience and all this meaning, and all of that is contained in this little creature. And in some ways, to me, David Lynch is President Roosevelt. He's this amazing, beautiful little creature that accumulated all this experience, and he's not just a guy. Like, he's like the most interesting little history book or esoteric book that's ever been born. And that's all I got to say about that.
I do have one actually last anecdote. So I don't know whether it was for that movie or some other movie, but Lynch was cast as either an extra or a supporting actor. And the director asked him, like, so what do you want for compensation? Because I only need you to come and say like a few lines, like literally
was it for
one
the Steven
day.
Spielberg movie?
It might have been, where he played John Ford or something. I don't know. But
yep. Okay, yeah.
But at any rate, they asked him, like, what do you want for a day of your time? And he goes, Cheetos. And they go, what? And he goes, normally, especially like with my wife and with my health, I don't eat them. I don't keep them in the house. But I miss Cheetos. So if you could just have a big bag of Cheetos under my chair, I'd be happy to do it for you. And so, in the name of David Lynch, I will go get a giant bag of Cheetos.
So
Because
will
smoking is out, unfortunately.
Well, I guess if we're gonna bring this to an end, R.I.P. David Lynch. We love you. We appreciate what you brought into this world, and wherever you're at, I'm sure you're enjoying the hell out of it.
Never born, never died, just reincarnated as a well cared for tortoise, and you know,
just reincarnated as President Roosevelt. By the way,
Yeah.
the last scene of that movie, as things end, it zooms out, and you just see a bunch of desert landscapes, and you see President Roosevelt waddling around. He's just doing his thing. He's all right.
End transmission.
All righty, star log over. For everybody who came in here, for everybody who's made it to this point, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And honestly, I loved every second of doing this series.
Bye. We're doing PTA next.
Peace out. And we're not doing PTA the next episode, but it will come someday.
He's going to be the next director, is what I mean.
Yeah,
if
definitely.
If we're going to do anybody like this. All right.
Alrighty.